The members that I have listed coming, you, Patrick, are here, I believe.
Yep, we have. Yep, I can see everybody. Ms. Erickson and Mr. Basil will not be joining us from what I was told. Then Mark is here, Tina's here, Tom Nuff's here, Sylvia Barker, Mike McGrath for everybody.
Patrick, you're breaking up a little bit. You might want to turn your video off if that helps you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Agronic, do you have everybody from your team? Good.
Okay. All right.
And then, who else?
The opposing counsel is also here, Patrick.
Yeah,
So.
Mr. Mack and Mr. Nelson's here too. Okay, I think we're okay.
All right, give me a second. Okay, Frank, you're set to go.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Township of Hillsborough Board of Adjustment meeting for Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Change my glasses. This meeting will be conducted virtually. The public will be given an opportunity to participate remotely through the advertised Zoom link or optional phone number identified in the public meeting notice. The public should use the raise hand feature in Zoom or the *9 if participating by telephone to indicate you would like to be recognized to speak. Application documents were made available for inspection at the township website at least 10 calendar days prior to the scheduled meeting date in accordance with the meeting notice. All board members, staff, and consultants will be participating remotely. Applicants and their professionals will be presenting remotely and will identify themselves before testifying. This meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, known as the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2020 annual meeting schedule has been provided to the officially designated newspapers, the township clerk, posted on the bulletin board at the Township Municipal Complex, and posted to the What Township's website. Additional notice has been provided to communicate that this meeting is being conducted according to the governor's executive orders and pursuant to Public Law 2020 C11, which allows for meetings to be conducted electronically. Tina, would you call a roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Stemler?
Here.
Ms. Haynes?
Here.
Mr. Sirachi?
Here.
Ms. Salili?
Here.
Mr. Valchek?
Here.
Ms. Erickson? Absent. Mr. Wallmarker?
Here.
Mr. Basil? Absent. Chairman Herbert?
Here.
Mr. Gorman?
Present.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Neff?
Here.
And I am here.
You got everybody?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to ask Fred Kinsler of our IT department to briefly explain the technology we're using tonight for this virtual meeting and how the public will be able to participate.
Sure, thanks, Frank. Well, we're using a Zoom platform, as I'm sure most are aware. When it's the public's turn to have comment, we will ask that they raise their hand on the Zoom platform or *9 on the phone. At that time, we'll accept one at a time. And again, please state your name and address for the record. You know, again, it's a large group, so we ask that you try to stay focused. And again, it'll be asking questions just to the specific witness at the time. We'll make sure it's very clear of what we're asking at that point, and that's how we'll proceed.
Yeah,
So.
when we get down to the application, we'll get a little bit deeper into that too.
Sure.
Okay, so first thing on the meeting, on the agenda for this evening is consideration of meeting minutes. We have none this evening. Second is consideration of resolutions. We have 5. The first resolution is Christian Community Chapel, file BA 16-10. Board discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Second,
Tina, who can vote on this?
Mr. Sirachi, Ms. Salili, Mr. Valchek, and Ms. Haynes.
Call roll, please.
Mr. Sirachi,
Yes.
Ms. Salili,
Yes.
Mr. Valchek,
Yes.
Ms. Haynes.
yes,
Okay.
Okay, resolution passes. The next resolution is Timco Family Associates LP BA 2001 for the subdivision. Board discussion on this resolution.
motion to approve.
Second.
Tina, who can vote on this one?
Mr. Stamler, Ms. Salili, Mr. Valchek, Mr. Walmacher, Ms. Haynes, and Chairman Herbert.
Okay, please call
Right.
roll for that.
Mr. Stamler,
Yes.
Ms. Salili,
Yes.
Mr. Valchek,
Yes.
Mr. Walmacher,
Yes.
Ms. Haynes,
Yes,
Chairman Herbert.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Next resolution is Timco Family Associates BA 2001 for the 2-family dwelling. Board discussion? Motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
And I believe the same people can vote on this one. So Tina, would you call roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Stamler,
Yes.
Ms. Salili,
Yes.
Mr. Valchek,
Yes.
Mr. Walmacher,
Yes.
Ms. Haynes,
yes,
Chairman Herbert.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Next is Norman Mann's file BA 2005. Board discussion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please, Tina. Who could vote on this, by the way?
Same people.
Okay, please call.
Mr. Stamler,
Yes.
Ms. Salili,
Yes.
Mr. Valchek,
Yes.
Mr. Walmacher,
Yes.
Ms. Haynes,
yes,
Chairman Herbert.
Yes. The last resolution is Robert Drake Jr., BA 20-08. Board discussion?
Motion to approve.
second,
Tina?
Same people. Mr. Stamler,
Yes.
Ms. Salili,
Yes.
Mr. Valchek,
Yes.
Mr. Walmacher,
Yes.
Ms. Haynes,
yes,
Chairman Herbert.
Yes. Next on the agenda is Board of Adjustment business. Chicky, did you have business to throw on the floor?
yes. I was going to suggest that you either appoint or ask for volunteers, a little subcommittee to see if we want to add anything to our existing list of recommendations for the Township Committee or Planning Board to look at, review some of the ordinances.
Okay, will we do this before the end of the year, or would that be January?
Well, if you appoint the subcommittee now, they could be ready in January for a report.
Okay, so let's do that.
And I will volunteer to be a
Okay.
member.
Do I have any other volunteer? I guess we should have 3 people. I'll volunteer, Chicky, and anybody else?
Yeah, I'll take the third spot.
Okay. And I'll get back to you on a meeting date in the next few days. So, very good. Any other board business?
Yeah, Frank, what's the status on the 6 resolutions we submitted over a year ago?
When you come to the subcommittee, you'll find out.
We'll let you know, John.
Yeah, should we have a subcommittee of the subcommittee?
No, this is the subcommittee. You're now empowered.
But we have no additional status of work.
No, nothing has happened since the last meeting. No.
Well,
Unless-
small update.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the considerations was when I'm sorry, my train of thought. So one of the issues that the board brought up in the past, or one of the recommendations, was involving dwellings, that if the act of God destroys them, that ordinance be revised. That ordinance is currently being revised through Township Committee at the moment. It went through a first passing. I'm not sure if it went through the second passing yet.
Okay, great.
Very good.
Thank you, Patrick.
This would be more
Thanks.
consistent. So,
Okay, next is business from the floor for matters not on the agenda. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to talk to us about items that are not on the agenda. So at this point, I'll ask Fred to unmute the public line and see if there's anybody that wants to talk about something that's not on the agenda tonight.
Sure. Okay, so anyone from the public who would like to speak on a matter not on the agenda this evening, you could please raise your hand at this time. I see none, Mr. Herbert.
Okay, so mute the line.
Thank you.
Okay, so next is we have one public hearing tonight. It's Harvesters Gospel Center, Inc., file BA 19-22. Patrick, would you introduce this application, please?
Sure thing. For the application form for this evening is Harvesters Gospel Center Incorporated, file number BA 19-22, located at block 203.10, lot 30, otherwise known as 490 Hillsborough Road. The applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval, D variances and waivers to construct an addition on the existing residential dwelling for a church or house of worship parsonage with associated stormwater, parking, lighting, landscaping, and other improvements on a property located in the R residential zoning district. EC reviewed this back on 10/26/20. And if I can just give a brief summary to the board about this application before moving forward, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So tonight, the board, we're looking at a few things. We're looking at a major site plan at the moment for the construction of the house of worship in conjunction with the dwelling on the property that will be used as a parsonage / a little bit of a meeting space for the house of worship. So involved tonight is a use variance, a D1, for the house of worship in conjunction with the parsonage on the property. This represents two principal uses on the property and thus represents a need for the D1 variance. There are also D3 variances involved at this point. D3 variances involve a wavering of conditions from a conditional use. The conditional use in this case is the house of worship, and the D3 variances being sought lie is that they need relief from two of the bulk standards involving the maximum lot frontage and the maximum impervious coverage. The lot frontage in this zone, I believe, is 200 feet, and the maximum. I'm sorry, and then whereas the applicant has 195 feet of frontage and the maximum impervious coverage in the zone is 15%, whereas I believe the applicant is requesting 17.25%. There will also be additional waivers for various parking buffers also being requested. I think that pretty much covers the minimum location without going too much and taking away from the applicant. Mark, do you have anything else to add right now?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I do have some comments, particularly because this is apparently an application of considerable interest. I don't want to take too much of everybody's time, but I think perhaps a bit of background may be helpful, particularly to members of the public.
Mark, can I just stop you here? Your volume's a little bit too low. Maybe you can get a little bit closer to your microphone. Or...
I can do that.
Okay. That's better.
Usually people say I'm too loud rather than too soft. First, for those who are not aware, we're all on Zoom and, we sort of like equal pictures here. People should understand I am not a member of the board. I am the board's attorney. I'm essentially the board's legal advisor and representative. So my comments are directed, of course, particularly to legal sorts of issues. One of the initial questions that people might have is, if the request of the applicant is not permitted, well, why are we here? Why are we here for something that's not permitted? The answer to that is that this body, this Zoning Board of Adjustment, is the only body that can, in appropriate circumstances, allow uses in Hillsborough Township that are contrary to the land use ordinance. That's why this application is before this body. Now, Mr. Gorman has recited the basics of the requests of the applicant, and as usual has done a good job of that. I do want to say a couple of things. Mr. Gorman referred to D3 and D6 variants, or D3 and D1 variances. For the public, those are simply references to the paragraph number in the law which refers to that type of variance. You'll hear those references a number of times, but they are simply paragraph references in the law. The site plan, if it is not something familiar to people, is a plan that the applicant is seeking approval for, includes a number of elements, and in this case, some that are not fully consistent with the ordinance. A site plan, though, is a plan for development of a property, including various elements such as layout, architectural design, and landscaping. So you'll see a lot of discussion about those things. For those who might be familiar with the board process, other board processes in Hillsborough, site plans are actually usually considered by the planning board, but because this application requires these D variances, these use variances, which can only be granted by this board, the site plan is also required to be considered by this board. Board procedure. It's important that people understand that this is a board that is referred to as a quasi-judicial board, if you want, literally partially judicial board. Meaning in many respects, it acts like a court. It must base its decisions on demonstrated facts, reasonable conclusions, and on the law. Its decisions must have a legal basis. Its decisions are definitively not a popularity contest. Procedure here is not a great deal unlike court. The applicant gets to present its case through its witnesses. Each of its witnesses will testify under oath and then be subject to cross-examination by the board's professional representatives, and the public. Everyone will be given a fair chance to ask questions of the witnesses, although those who are represented by a lawyer will have their questions asked by their lawyer. Cross-examination of witnesses is not the time to make statements or express opinions about an application. Statements and opinions will be heard by the board, but not during cross-examination of witnesses. After the applicant has presented its case, those who wish to will have the opportunity to testify or present their witnesses. All testimony will be taken under oath and will be subject to cross-examination. Again, persons represented by a lawyer will work through their lawyer, but their lawyer may call them to testify. After others have had the opportunity to present what they wish, the applicant may present further testimony in response to whatever questions or issues have been raised. And others may thereafter also have another opportunity to present. This will continue to be through sworn testimony and cross-examination. Now, I want to comment a bit on written statements that have been received by the board in advance of the meeting. I know that at least 2 have been received by the board. New state rules relating to remote meetings like this one and relate generally to public bodies, not specifically to this type of body, require that public comments by email or by letter be made part of the meeting record. This applies to all public bodies. This board, however, is different from some other public bodies because, as I said before, it is quasi-judicial. And this board must base its decisions only on information that it can accept as being reliable. And that typically means sworn testimony subject to cross-examination. Comments submitted by email or letter are, of course, neither under oath nor subject to cross-examination. So this board must be cautious about basing its decisions on such comments. While the board will be aware of comments received by email and letter, it is, you should know, unlikely to use any information in those comments unless the same information is provided in live testimony. This suggests that if you have submitted a comment and you would like the board to give it consideration, you should consider testifying at the appropriate time and allowing yourself to be cross-examined. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so I guess we're ready to go. Mr. Ogrodnik, you have the floor.
Good evening, members of the board and members of the public. My name is Mike Ogrodnik. I'm an attorney at Savo, Shaw, Gillespie, Ogrodnik, and Fisher in Somerville. I'm here on behalf of the Harvesters Gospel Center, which operates a Christian church as Harvest International Center. We filed an application for a house of worship for a 5.1 acre property located on Hillsborough Road, as Mr. Gorman had explained. The application proposes the demolition of several portions of the improvements currently on the property, including the existing outbuilding, garage, septic field, and pool area, and proposes an entirely new 5,800 square foot building on the site while maintaining the existing house. And I'll talk about that in a minute, as we're going to amend after discussion with the applicant, we are going to withdraw our application for the use of the house, the residential existing structure, as a parsonage or any type of residential use. So that will eliminate the D1 variance that we were seeking initially when we filed this application. So as Mr. Anderson explained in his very thorough introduction, we're here on a conditional use variance, which is uses that are permitted in the zone as of right. However, they have to meet these certain conditions. And the conditions that we don't meet are the lot width. We're 5 feet short. It's 195 feet, and whereas 200 feet is required. In addition, we're seeking an impervious coverage variance. 15% is permitted, and we're a little less than 2.5% over that, so around 17.5%. We have also discussed the idea of additional D1 uses necessitated. Again, we eliminated the parsonage, although I would comment that that's generally been considered in cases as accessory uses. But we also have identified variant D1 use variances as follows. No lot shall contain more than one principal building. No lot shall contain more than one principal use, and no building shall contain more than one principal use. Those are codified under section 18874A, B, and C. With respect to the idea of what uses are conditional, or I'm sorry, are accessory, I think the Seminole case can be slightly instructive on this. And I did submit this in a letter to the board early on in this case when we were seeking use as a parsonage. And one of the seminal cases is an appellate division case, Shin v. Washington Township Planning Board, states that in general, an accessory use is one that is one, subordinate to and serves a principal use, two, is located on the same lot as the principal use, and three, is customarily incidental to the principal use. So our position, and we do have a professional planner that will expand on this, on these legal arguments, that we do believe that the use of the residential structure as the office and small meeting rooms for things like youth group study are accessory uses and would not necessitate those additional variances under the code sections 18874A, B, and C. With me tonight, I have Craig Stiers, who is our professional civil engineer. He's an engineer out of Somerville, New Jersey. We also have Christine Cafone. She is our professional licensed planner in the state of New Jersey. We also have Gary Dean, who is our professional traffic engineer. And we have Ed Cook, who is our environmental professional. We have Pastor Fred Sue, and we also have Jacob Lynn, which are two of the senior members of the church. I see we're going up to 58 attendees and 21 panelists. So I'm encouraged by that amount of participation. I would just ask that the board have an open mind. It's taken much energy and cost and effort to get this applicant to this point. And so I would just ask that the board and the public have an open mind with respect to the use and whether perhaps it is compatible with the area. With respect to the municipal land use law, we are required to provide notice. I believe we've satisfied all of the notice requirements and submitted affidavits of publication as well as proofs of service to all of the property owners and outside agencies, property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. Unless there's any legal questions, I would ask Mr. Stiers to share his engineering drawings. We only have a limited amount of exhibits today. So I would ask Mr. Stiers to be sworn in and qualified. I know he's testified many times before this board, but qualified as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Mike, could I interrupt, or Frank, for 1 second? Mike, since you're changing the use of the house, does that change, Patrick, the calculation for parking? And will that change the impervious? How many changes is this going to entail?
I'm sorry, I believe the question is a little bit directed to me and maybe a little bit to Mr. Ogrodnik. We need more information to make a determination on from the applicant. Will it need more parking? We'll have to see, because we need more information, like I said, at the moment, to make that determination. If parking is going to be more of a requirement than what they proposed on the original site plan. And then I think the second question was, will the house be demolished?
No, the intention
I'm
of the
sorry.
applicant is to utilize the existing residential structure specifically for, originally it was early on in the project, it was contemplated for use as a rectory. But after several discussions with my client, we felt that additional intensity of use on the lot would not be desirable, and we wanted to eliminate one of the more challenging variances in this application.
Mark, any questions, any input at this point?
I would say only that I think Mr. Gorman raises a proper question, which I'm sure the applicant will address, about parking. The calculations that were done by parking and submitted by the applicant, and indeed the calculations done by the Township's Planning Department obviously were based on the original application and not this modification just announced tonight.
Okay, and did I understand, Mr. Ogrodnik, you're withdrawing a D1 for the residents, for the use of the house, but you still need a D1 for 2 buildings? Is that right?
Well, our legal argument is that the use of the residential structure as an office and a small meeting area is an accessory use to the house of worship, as defined in the case that I had cited in my introduction. And I can expand on that at the appropriate time, but I have a professional planner who is much more skilled at explaining the law as it relates to accessory uses.
So Mark will wait for that then, right?
Hey, Chicky, in Mr. Maskey's memo from November 12th, it looks like there's only 2 spaces that were coming from the residents and 59 from the church itself. So I guess that would be the number if it's going to change, but.
But the two parking, Jim, is based on it being a residence, not a meeting place and an office. Those numbers might be higher than just 2.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman, Pat Gorman, I just have a couple more questions at the moment. To Mr. Ogrodnik, will there be any additional new exhibits being shown tonight? And number 2, do you have which professional will be speaking more about the portions changing more into a meeting space?
So the exhibits, all the exhibits that we intend to introduce are uploaded on the Board of Adjustment meeting application that's on the website, on the Civil Clerk website.
Okay.
Mr. Stiers colorized and submitted an aerial view, which have been online for 2 days. It's just a colorized landscape plan and a colorized rendering, which is common to just provide an additional graphic detail of the site plan. Your other question, Patrick?
Yeah, the other question, which expert is going to be talking about the Parsons changeover, your architect or Mr. Stiers?
My intent is to have Mr. Stiers discuss the meeting space. Again, this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom residential structure. And I had submitted a certification, as I had indicated, that details what I would describe as the operational testimony, which talks about the hours of operation, the meeting times, and what is anticipated. And perhaps it would make sense to go over that at the appropriate time with the planner. We also have live testimony from Pastor Sue. I would be remiss to not have him speak to the community about his organization. I see many of the people in the waiting room here are the parishioners of the church. So I would, we can go over the certification, and then we can ask any follow-up questions directly to the pastor.
Okay, so we're ready to move ahead, Mr. Stiers?
No further questions.
Mr. Chairman, it's Freddie Kinsler, IT. I just want to make sure, Mr. Bogrodnik, Mr. Stiers is going to be sharing his screen. Is that what we want to make sure?
If Craig's up for it, for sure.
Craig,
Give it a
Craig,
try.
I gave you hosting capability, so you have the ability. You should see the share at the bottom. I just want to make sure before we get too far.
And I just wanted to, for the public's edification, if they look on the civil clerk menu with all the application documents, near the top of the list is the certification of Pastor Fred Sue. And that details his experience with the current size of his church. They have a pastor and an associate pastor, 2 youth ministers, and currently they intend to operate on Sunday from 9 to noon would be the main service, the weekly service for this house of worship. They also have a 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. prayer meeting on Tuesday night, which is approximately an average of 15 people. All these are all pre-pandemic numbers. On Wednesday night from 7 to 9 p.m., a young adult meeting of approximately 15 people, and a Saturday afternoon from 2 to 6, indoor-outdoor activities of approximately 20 people. On Saturday night from 7 to 9:30 p.m., they have what they describe as an equipping class for adults, which is approximately 10 to 15 people, as well as a youth meeting of approximately 10 to 15 people. So the majority of the use will not have people actively going in and out of this property. But again, it's mainly focused on the Sunday worship, which has been historically an average of approximately 25 cars. And that, again, that's pre-pandemic.
Okay, so he's gonna testify to this someplace along the line, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually provide a certification for operational testimony, but due to some slight bit of a language barrier, I felt that it was appropriate to lay out the specifics of the hours of operation, employees, and number of people so that the public could look at it as we proceed.
Okay.
Mike, I have a quick question.
This is Phil Salili. My question is, my understanding is that you will be calling the engineer first as opposed to Pastor Fred Hsu. Is that correct?
Yes, generally, I like to begin with the site plan so the public can get an idea of the scope of the project, of the design of the project. But certainly we'll have Pastor Sue available to answer any additional operational testimony that may come up.
Okay, just a point of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Godnick, I have one question. Haynes, will most churches have a summer day camp or some other special outdoor activities. Can you elaborate, or will Pastor Sue address that later?
I will punt that question to Pastor Sue, but that has not been in our discussions. This is a relatively small congregation.
See?
All right, but I would like, especially the summer camp, most churches have, a day camp with the children for several weeks. All right, as long as that gets answered later. Thank you.
I'll make a note. Thank you.
You ready to swear your witness in? Tina, would you swear Mr. Stiers in, please?
Yes, Mr. Stiers. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. State and spell your last name for the record.
It's Craig Stiers, S-T-I-R-E-S.
Thank you.
Mr. Stiers, can you give us a little background of your expertise?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University. I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey since 1993 and have been practicing. I own President Stiers Associates in Somerville, New Jersey. I have testified before your boards as well as numerous boards throughout central New Jersey, numerous churches, industrial, commercial, residential properties.
We can accept the qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Grodnick?
Craig, could you share your screen of the exhibits that you intend to introduce tonight to explain the site plan application as well as any relief necessitated by the conditional uses?
Okay. Does everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Thanks, Mr. Stiers.
Okay. This is the site plan that was submitted, cover sheet. Guess I could really move down to the next page. Start with the existing conditions. The site is known as 490 Hillsborough Road and also known as Block 203.10, Lot 30. It's located on the south side of Hillsborough Road between Beverly Drive and Ardsley Road. It contains 5.11 acres. 5.11 acres is measured from the center line of Hillsborough Road at this point because there has been no dedication in the past. And the lot is 195 feet wide by 1,142 feet deep. Based on historic aerials, the property was part of a small farm that was subdivided into 3 5-acre tracts, similar to the one, the subject property. There's one on the east side, one on the west side, pretty much identical shape, size, all 5 acres, all extremely deep properties. Between 1972 and 1979, the surrounding subdivision was constructed. And at this time, there's currently, as Mike said, an existing dwelling on the property, along with a detached garage, pool, a larger shed. If I zoom in here, there's a larger shed that's behind the pool. The detached garage is in this location. The septic is off to the, I guess you could say, southeast of the house. And then, as you can see, the remaining property, approximately 780 feet, is existing woods to the next property to the south. Again, 2 properties on either side. There are also, sorry about that, 2 small isolated wetland patches that are behind the shed. We
And
have
that's where, and excuse me, Craig, it's John Stamler. And the wetlands, that large wetland area, I noticed that the building, the church itself, is going right over that. So we have to address that later if you don't mind.
Yes, yeah, we'll go through. I was just going to say that. Well, first of all, these 2 wetland patches total just under 2,500 square feet, so they're really not too large. But in any case, we have submitted to the NJDP for a general permit to fill those wetlands. And right now the status is pending. Because it's a major project, they're reviewing the stormwater associated with the project. And once we get through that, we expect the permit to be issued.
This is Phil Salilli. This is Phil Salilli. I'm sorry if you have, I have a question. Do you
Sure.
have a time frame as to when this information is going to be provided to you?
That's a great question. We submitted this application June 2019. So, I mean, that's even without the pandemics. They had it for 6 months before the pandemic even started. So I would expect in the next, from our discussions and correspondence with the DEP, it picked back up probably in August, September. So we're working through it right now. We have to get some information back to them because they had a couple questions. So I would say in the next month or two, we would have the permit.
Understandable that that information would be very pertinent to the board.
And Craig, it's John Stamler again. Maybe it's a question for the engineer, but the wetlands are there. By filling them in, and I don't understand, that means there's a water problem as it is. You put a building as big as being proposed, especially over the wetlands that are being filled in. What happens to all the water that's coming off the building?
I'm going to get to the proposed portion of the project. I'm kind of going through the existing conditions right now. But those two isolated wetlands are basically because it's a flat area in the back of the property. And it just don't really, when it rains, it tends to sit in those two small locations.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I guess, Haynes, my question is, okay, but it's going to be covered up now with the building and or parking lot and driveway. So it's no longer going to sit there.
Correct.
So I think Mr. Stamler's question was, where is that water going?
Okay. Are there any further questions with the existing conditions?
I think you're going to address that in the next.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll move forward and address it. I was trying to get to establish a baseline with the existing conditions. To finish up with the existing, if I move towards the front here, again, Hillsborough Road, there's currently an existing septic, the driveway, and then there is a small ditch that is picked up from a head wall to an inlet piping, and then discharge on the north side of Hillsborough Road to another ditch which conveys to the north.
Okay, before you leave the existing conditions, I was out there for a site walk on Sunday, and it looked like on the left-hand side of the front of the house, there was a lot of mud and it looked like something happened there. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, that was part of, like I said, with the DEP, there was some questions about the recharge in the basin. And we had 3 tests in the bottom of the basin, and they asked for some additional testing. And that was completed just last week. So that was the reason for the mud. We had 4 excavations in the front yard, of which we did perk tests and some additional testing, which we will ultimately supply to the DEP.
Okay.
So that was the reason for the disturbance in the front yard.
Thank you.
Okay. Actually, I'd probably like to move to the colored rendering. So this is a colored rendering of the landscape plan that is in the set, and it's just colored up for a little more clarity so people can see it. Okay. What we're looking to do is to maintain the existing residence and construct the new church behind the residence, install or construct a new driveway that would come into the new parking lot, Currently, this has 59 parking spots. That was my mistake. It should be 60, so I do have to add one more spot, and that will be in this location right here. So we'll have 60 parking spots. The church will have 180 seats, and based on the ordinance requirements, it is one parking spot for 3 seats in the church, resulting in requiring 60 parking spaces. And hence the reason for the 60. What we tried to do is keep the impervious coverage as low as possible and condensed and around the church and the existing house, so as to keep the impervious coverage as low as possible. That also included, instead of a 30-foot driveway and aisle, we have 24 feet. But we have maintained the proper 10 by 20 parking spaces of the ordinance. With regards to the wetlands, so this is one of the wetland areas right here, and one is right here. And you were correct, we were going to put the building in that location. So what we're doing as far as the water being able to drain now is we're going to put a new detention basin in the front of the property. So the stormwater will drain in the back of the parking lot, be collected to a new inlet on the north side of the parking lot, then be piped towards the front, a second inlet, 2 more inlets at the terminus of the driveway before it goes on to Hillsborough Road and ultimately into the basin. The basin will take care of the stormwater management to the outlet structure, out to a new inlet connecting into the existing inlet described in Hillsborough Road, and then ultimately out to the ditch to the north. It's the intent that the basin and the project will meet all stormwater regulations for water quality, groundwater recharge, and quantity reductions. As far as the utilities, there's an existing sanitary main and manhole on the north side of Hillsborough Road in this location right here. There's actually a stub coming out of the manhole. So we were going to connect to that stub, continue that onto the property, and service both the church and the existing house. There's also a 12-inch main for water in Hillsborough Road. So we are going to connect to the main and bring in both domestic and fire service into the church, as well as servicing the house. There's existing gas already to the property, and obviously there's electric cable, whatever. There's a pole in this location. Whether we convert it to underground is to be determined at this point. The project will also have proposed lighting in the parking lot. These poles will be directed downwards and only be 15 feet high, so as to minimize any light pollution. It's expected that they will only be on during business hours or when members are there. These are LED lights, so as far as timing them or motion sensors, dimming them, there's a lot of variables that can be used with LED lighting these days. As far as the landscaping, you can see on the east side along the property line, east side, west side, both sides are landscaped fairly well with a mix of deciduous and arborvitae evergreen plantings. And then if we, again, this is just the front portion of the site, but from this line, which is the existing tree line that we would stop at, from this point to the rear of the property is approximately 600 feet. And I could show that on the aerial that we've made. And what this is an aerial photograph of the area with the rendering superimposed on the aerial. So if I were to zoom in a little bit, so that point, as I said, this is the back of the clearing for the project. From this point to the back of the property is 600 feet. So you can see that this area is going to remain undisturbed. There's fairly well successional trees from probably 20, 30 years. So some of these trees are getting a little bit larger and would remain. If I go back to the rendering, we will also propose a garbage recycling area for the church that would be picked up as needed. I don't expect that there would be a significant amount of refuse coming from the church to the point that it would most likely be a smaller garbage truck that would pick up. That way, as far as the circulation of the truck, it would be expected that they would come in, pick up the refuge, back out, and then exit the property. There will be 3 ADA parking spaces, which is required based on 60 spaces, and the accessible route would be directly across the driveway into the church. And I think there were some comments about filling of the property. What we've done is to make the church and the existing residents AD accessible between each other. So right now there's a deck on the back of the house, which would be removed, and the grade would be raised so that the sidewalks connecting between the buildings would be accessible. So we did have to raise the grade a little bit through the middle of the property, but by the time we got to the property lines, obviously we were matching in to the existing conditions. That raising the grade also helped for the flow of the runoff to the proposed inlets on either side of the parking lot, as I previously described. Lastly, we are also dedicating a 40-foot right-of-way dedication for Hillsborough Road, which would be consistent with the properties on north and south of, east and west of us. So the properties next to us still are similar to our property. And there's the width of Hillsborough Road is to the edge of pavement. What we are doing is dedicating the right of way and then also widening the road with curb and sidewalk, which would be consistent with the roadway section to the east and west. So ultimately, if the properties on either side of us, if there's a dedication or a widening, then you would have a complete connection of curb and sidewalk from Beverly Drive to Ardsley Road. Any questions on that?
I do have a couple.
Mr. Sires, I just have a question. Where are the dimensions on your site plan here? Driveway, parking lot, the church building itself? I don't see them on the plans that I have.
Yeah.
Are they there?
If I go to the site plan
Yes.
and we go to,
Sheet 4.
correct, sheet 4 of 10, which is a horizontal control plan.
Yeah, let me address that because I went over that pretty extensively, and I see you have a lot of side yard and front yard dimensions, but no place do I see there. For instance, I don't see the length of the driveway, the width and the length of the parking lot, the setback from the church, the size of the church. It seems like there'd be a lot of dimensions that should be on this that are not.
Well, we have like you said, the front yard. We typically dimension the closest points.
Yeah, but let's say I'm the construction worker with the bulldozer shows up on day one. Where does he start digging the church?
What's that?
If I'm a bulldozer operator that shows up on the first day, where does he start digging a hole for the church? How many feet?
Well, first of all, it would be surveyed and staked out.
I know, but shouldn't it be on this site plan? Shouldn't these numbers be on the site plan?
Well, here's a setback to the church, 51 feet.
I see that.
We have a setback to the other side of the church.
I see that. How far back is it from the road?
Well, the closest point is the building in front of it. So that's why we dimensioned it.
Right, but how far back is it? You don't show any distance between the building, the church, and that point.
We can easily add that.
I think, I mean, for that bulldozer operator, you would seem like you should, you know.
And I would jump in, Mr. Stiers, I don't know if you filled out the calculation sheet, but number one, I don't know, the driveway area seems to be where it says existing, it seems to actually include the new one, but how did they come up with that 27,517 square foot number if there's nothing on any of your site plans, at least that I have, any of the pages that show the length or width of the parking lot, and as Mr. Herbert just said, the driveway itself? How did they come up with that number? And it's in the wrong place anyway, but that's another issue.
Yeah, see, I would have thought that those figures that Ms. Haynes is talking about would be on the table on the first page and then transferred to the impervious surface form.
We have
The impervious surface form, for instance, shows 27,517 square feet for the driveway area. I would have thought that would be on the table there, so we can, you know, as the official historical record, right there, someplace in that schedule.
We have
Not only that, but under proposed new.
You have the percentage, but what is that percentage based on? I had to work backwards to come up with that.
I mean, we can add a chart to the, I mean, I had put together a chart for the, if that's required, I can easily add that to the chart to.
Well, we haven't seen any numbers.
Yeah. Again, the impervious surface form is confusing because, you know, you show as existing the drive. I understand where you're coming from. You're adding up four things. You're adding up the driveway, the existing building, the church, and the walks for a total number. But I would think that should be on that table right there. So, you know, so we know about it in the future. If anybody ever came back to this application.
Yeah, we'd be glad to add that. It's not a problem.
Okay.
I'll be honest, this is a chart that we typically use for submissions for applications in Hillsborough.
Yeah.
If a detailed breakdown is required, I have no problem putting that on there.
Right, that would just be helpful because I looked at this form for quite a bit of time trying to figure out where you came up to it, and I finally understood what you were doing. But then
Okay.
I went back to your site plan and I couldn't find any of the numbers that were on the impervious surface form. So, you know, I had to be guessing at what you were doing.
Well, I mean, I
Department
fully
calculator.
understand we can add additional dimensions,
Okay, I wish you.
but secondarily, the plan is to scale. There's dimensions of the 24-foot wide driveway, 20-foot wide or 20-foot deep parking spots, 10-foot wide. It details the handicap or ADA spaces, details the parking spots in the back, details the width of the driveway in the back,
I saw the,
details the width of the driveway. And then you also have the architectural plans, which further detail the church.
I agree, but again, exactly where is that church going to be on that site plan? I'd have to guess, or add up a lot of other numbers.
Well, we
And I would say
we also do construction stakeout, and none of these contractors will do anything without us staking it out first, and or someone else.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just pulling your leg on that one, but I'm saying, I hope. But
you know, Mr.
Yeah.
Stiers, I don't think it's the board or the public's job to do all the adding up of the width of the parking and the width of this and that. Normally what we get in an application and on site plan are all these dimensions right there on the site plan.
Like I said, if there's more needed, I will be glad to add them on there.
yes, so I would like to know where, you know, give us some dimensions with the churches and the size of the church and the length of the driveway and with, you know.
Okay.
Move on to a second question. Have you read the fire marshal's report from November 17th?
Yes.
Okay, now he's requesting a second entrance, number one, and a turnaround. So can you address where, you know, where would you put a second entrance if?
Well, it's kind of a contradictory statement to the ordinance because the ordinance requires one driveway to a site. And secondly, I mean, the ordinance requires 30-foot buffers on either side. So it would make it difficult to provide that second means of access. I mean, and thirdly, we are trying to minimize the impervious coverage on the site.
I understand.
I did have a correspondence with the fire chief, and, you know, again, what he said is, you know, these are recommendations and it's up to the board to make that final decision.
I would also note that that same comment about allowing turnaround space between the parking aisles to the rear, rather than a car and or a fire truck having to back up, I don't know, 6 or 8 parking places. Those were also mentioned on Mr. Euro's report. And I think this board usually puts a lot of weight on the fire marshal's recommendations. And if the impervious, if this lot has a problem with that, but you have to meet the safety issues.
Understood.
From an engineering standpoint, from our end, I do agree, especially with the turnaround areas at the rear of the parking lot, especially for a use like a church where everyone's going to be arriving at the same time, most likely. Everyone's going to be driving down here looking for parking spaces and potentially backing up in the aisle, and everyone trying to turn around to go to the other side potentially. So it's definitely, you know, my recommendation that there should be these 2 parking bays and aisles should be connected at the rear with a looped area where they can pass straight through. So for people, for members, you know, people coming to the church, as well as for emergency access and trucks.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Mr. Stiers, just having been before this board before, perhaps would the ability to decrease the width of the parking spaces to a smaller size be able to accommodate a turnaround at the end without eliminating any additional parking spaces?
Well, the parking spaces in Hillsborough are 10 by 20, which are larger than other towns. Most towns are 9 by 18. So we could definitely look into that. If we could make these spaces 9 by 18, that would afford us some additional impervious coverage that we can try to loop the driveway in the back. So that's definitely a consideration, yes.
And make sure that the fire trucks,
Yep.
you know, again, the biggest ones can fit there.
I mean, one of the other things is that if you were to look at the grading plan, and as you can see that I've created a berm for the basin, which is approximately 10 foot wide. So maybe I could work with the fire official to possibly, you know, put down, you know, whether it's, you know, the mesh in the grass to be able to get the fire truck out this point, but it will also require some adjustments. I would have to tighten up the landscaping to be able to get, obviously, the fire truck through this area. So we could look into that, definitely.
And Mr. Stiers, I'm assuming you're going to go over the entire report from T&M, but one other question that was raised under utilities and grading, is this accurate? The applicant is proposing to raise the overall, this is number 5, overall grade of the site by approximately 2 feet?
No, like I said in my testimony, what we're looking to do is make the building and the house and the church accessible between each other. So the grade change is in this area right here in the center of the site. So
Okay.
there is a 2 foot raise in grade along the west side, and that meets the existing condition.
Okay.
There's no change in the back. Basically, this curb line in the back matches the existing grade. And then along the east side, you can see I've created a swale which ultimately drains into the detention basin.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of a grade change in the middle of the site.
Does this property currently drain on either one of the properties on either side?
It's interesting question, I guess you could say. If I were to go to the, oops, sorry, wrong way. The rear of the property drains from east to west. And there's a ridge line approximately through the middle of the property in this location here, just behind the tree line. At this point, it essentially starts to turn itself and ultimately comes, so the front half of the property ultimately drains to that ditch on the northeast corner of the property. So in the proposed condition, sorry. Obviously, the existing condition in the back, that high point, as I outlined before, is approximately right here. So the entire back of the property will remain unchanged. All this runoff will be collected and put into the basin that will ultimately drain to that same location as it does today.
So if there's any current impact on this other properties, you're going to correct that? Is that what you're saying?
I really don't see any impact on the adjacent properties. Because right now, the runoff from this property, for example, goes from south to north into this ditch and again into that head wall.
Right.
On the west side, our property drains from east to west. However, we're cutting off all that runoff from east to west and collecting it and putting it into the basin. So this property to the west would be at or less than the existing condition now.
Right. Okay. So and I agree that the property on the lower part seems to be higher.
Right.
And draining towards this property into that ditch.
Right. And that's kind of where that wetland is where that transition is from traveling east to west and west to east.
Mm-hmm.
So it sits, and I was there on Monday Monday afternoon when we got that rain, and the water was pretty much sitting right in this pocket, right where the wetlands were. And it was not draining, it was just sitting on the property.
It was sitting there on Sunday after Thursday's rain.
Yeah.
Since you're speaking about the retention area, number 5 in TNM's report under stormwater management, question that it's supposed to drain within 72 hours and yours does not fully drain it does within 84 hours. And it suggests that, or says that you should revise, I guess, the design. How will you handle that?
Like I said, we just last week we did additional testing in and around the basin, so we have further detail of the rechargeability of the soils. So we expect we could be able to correct that to get it to 72 hours. Once we get through that, there's a clay layer on the upper areas. Once we get below that, there's fractured shale. And the perk tests that we had the other day were extremely fast. So we believe we can correct that and get it drained within 72 hours.
Just have to make sure you send those test results to our office and update the drainage report accordingly. Yep. So we have that.
Yep, no problem.
And I imagine DEP would require that anyway also.
Yes, yep.
Craig, do you want to?
Any further questions?
I have one further one, Mr. Stires. I don't know whether you, in conjunction with the architect, well, let me ask this first. Is there going to be a basement on this building, on the church?
No.
Okay. Why did you decide that there would not be a basement? Because if you had a basement, you could have some meeting rooms down there and potentially lessen the footprint of that building, which would help your impervious numbers.
I would have to leave that to the our client or the applicant.
Okay, I'd like that answered at some point.
I do have a few questions, comments from our letters, if you want me to go through those now.
A fan of Bob's report?
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right. I won't go through everything. Some of them are just comments. Some have been discussed already. Mr. Steyer, are you going to get into the use of the existing building at all, just as far as parking goes? Because, you know, we do have the parking calculations right now based on the church. So we just need some testimony on what's going in that existing dwelling there, you know, so we can come up with the proper parking calculation. You know, the ordinance does say that if you have two separate uses, you're supposed to, you know, consider them separately and provide parking for each. I understand most likely the two uses wouldn't be going on at the same time. Perhaps you could touch on that, but I think we should get all this on the record and clarified.
Sure.
Tom, you're on page 2, right? Item B. Of the report, page 2?
Yes. It's more actually comment 7 on page 3 regarding the existing use or the existing dwelling.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been under the premise that the existing house would be ancillary to the church, and that the really the driving force, I guess you could say, or the most intensive parking demand would be the church itself. And we utilize the seating in the church of 180 seats to develop those 60 spaces.
What exactly is the other secondary building used for? You know, I think we just need to clarify that. You know, is it office space? Is it meeting space? You know, is it those uses that were in the pastor certification? Is it those meetings that?
Yeah, it's my understanding it was meeting and office space were going to be done in the existing house,
as well as storage, and
Right.
we'll have the applicant testify with a little more specificity on that.
Okay, I have a question kind of related to that. There's no kitchen proposed in the church. I'm assuming there's probably a smallish kitchen in the house. Is that kitchen going to remain? Is there going to be any kind of kitchen facility somewhere?
Yeah, the intent is for the kitchen to remain for things like coffee and pastries, but there's certainly no intent to have any type of commercial kitchen or any type of food
Mr.
service.
Rodnick, you understand that this will not be considered because you're not testifying.
Sure, I'll bring in my witness at the appropriate time. Just wanted to answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll have that witness just clarify some of the uses then, and that they'll be operating independently at separate times. The next comment, number 8, was just regarding the sidewalk along the frontage. As you mentioned, there is sidewalk not directly adjacent to this property, but nearby, not too far to the east and west. So would you be agreeable to just extending the sidewalk limits to the property limits?
Yeah, we could do that. I think the reason being was that we put the curb to a certain point where we could transition back to the existing edge of pavement. So we stopped the sidewalk at that same point. So we could extend it. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I agree. The curb, I understand why you did that. I just want to make sure, you know, in the future, if the township is able to get sidewalk on the adjacent properties, there's no question over who has to come back to fill the gaps in.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to answer as far as your letter, I went through the letter in detail, and as far as the comments, I mean, they're all really adding additional details to the plans and or the reports. And I really don't have any questions or concerns with any of your comments.
All right, I'll just touch on a couple of them that I had highlighted. I won't go through every single one.
Yep.
Tom, it's Patrick, real quick. If I can piggyback on your comment, where that sidewalk area is, it looks like the property line is being cut back and additional right of way is going to be granted to the township, correct? And that sidewalk is within that right of way?
Yes, so the new right-of-way line would be, as I'm showing on the plan here. And so this would be township property. The end of the sidewalk is in this location as well as the curb. So see, I stopped the curb here and then transitioned to the existing edge of pavement. So that's why the sidewalk stopped there, but I can extend it to the property line. That's not a problem. But all of that will be in the township right away in the future.
Craig, does that dedication reduce the area of the lot size?
Yes.
And which again, of course, increases the impervious?
The percentage, yes.
The next comment 9, we discussed earlier about the turnaround areas in the parking lot. So again, that would increase the impervious coverage variance. So those, that would just have to be decided and discussed that, variance would need to be approved.
Right. And I think if the board were amenable to smaller parking spaces, that would, allow us some addition or some impervious coverage that we can loop that around and with a reasonable increase in coverage.
I defer to Pat a little bit. He has some more familiarity with the township, but I will say that there are many other municipalities that do have parking at 9 foot wide. I'm aware of others that do have 10 feet. Certain instances it's required. Certain instances it's more beneficial. In certain areas where it's more elderly people, a lot of times you see wider parking spaces at 10 feet. Sometimes in shopping centers where you have people opening, closing the doors, shopping carts going around. So it is something that could be considered. Are you going to have a separate traffic engineer provide some testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple more just regarding some of the landscaping. If you could go to the landscaping sheet, perhaps. Yes. So the first comment under section F was about the ground-mounted sign. Would it be possible to add some landscaping around that sign?
Yes. Yeah, we added the sign at the last minute, so really should have landscaped at the time, but we were just kind of trying to get the plans in. That's not a problem at all.
And then maybe just around the basin, just because sometimes the basins, as much as they should be maintained properly, reality is they aren't always maintained properly. Sometimes they don't always look the best. Would we be able to get some additional shrubs or additional trees around that basin, particularly along the front and the driveway entrance, maybe along the berm area?
Yeah, I was trying to stay away from the berm with trees, but maybe we can put some shrubbery along the front of it, interspersed with maybe the street trees. Yeah. Yeah,
just something mixed in a little bit.
Yep.
And then regarding the buffers on the east and western property lines, because you are adjacent to residential properties, buffer areas are required. Looks like you have a mix of evergreens and deciduous trees. While normally I would agree it's nice aesthetically to provide a mix, I'm thinking in this case, it may be more beneficial, the trees directly along the property line that are the deciduous, to mix in more evergreens instead of the deciduous, mostly related to the the vehicle lights, because those trees, they're going to give a canopy, but they're only going to be a skinny trunk where the headlights are. So they're not really going to block as much of the headlights. So if you had more of a double staggered row of evergreens mixed, I think that would just give a little more protection to the neighboring properties.
Yeah, and especially on the east side, if we're able to pull off that secondary means for the emergency access, maybe a single or a tighter staggered row would accommodate that as well. So we can look into that. Yes.
Okay. And the lighting, you said would not be overnight. What are the approximate hours the lights would be on? Would there be any security lighting left overnight, or would they all be shut down at a certain hour?
I would expect that they would be all shut down. Probably within an hour after the end of the usage, whenever it may be.
We would just want to.
I would say potentially do motion sensors, but with, say the deer goes through or something like that, it's going to turn the lights on. So I don't think that would be a good idea for that reason. I think we just shut it off within an hour, a half hour of whenever they're done using the facility.
All right, we would just want to hear from the applicant then, approximately what time that would be. I'm assuming it wouldn't be too late for use like this, but we just want to get that clear for the record.
Yep.
Yeah, the applicant would work with the board planner, Mr. Maskey and Mr. Gorman, as well as the engineer on the timing, the shielding for the lighting, as well as any post-construction noise testing if that need arises.
Okay. And the only other comment, is there going to be any large mechanical equipment, generators? Where's the air conditioning going? Anything that we need to look at?
I had a discussion with the architect today, and it's expected that there'll probably be 2 air conditioners in this location, which is on the east side of the building, and 3 at the other end. The furnaces will be in the attic. So those 3 air conditioners would be the only mechanicals outside.
So
they're all 2x2.
Okay. So that's not too large, but we just want to make sure that those would be screened and buffered with the landscaping around the site.
Yeah, and we can obviously add them to the site plan. I literally just got we had the correspondence today, so we can add that to the plan.
That's all.
And as far as the noise they would generate to the next property?
Based on my understanding, these are residential size air conditioners.
I do have a question about the parking. Give me a reference. Let's say at the ShopRite. You familiar with the Hillsborough ShopRite parking lot?
Yes.
You know if they're 9-foot or 10-foot parking spaces?
That I can't answer.
Okay, I'm just trying to see what happens when you go from 9 feet down to 10 feet, 10 feet down to 9 feet.
Right.
Okay.
I'd say I've worked in a lot of towns over the years. I honestly would say 9 foot is more common than 10 feet.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Dave Maskey. Can I jump in for a minute?
Yes.
On that, yeah, the standard policy in the township is that non-residential uses tend to stick with the 10x20. Residential, we go the 9x18, obviously for RSIS standards, but it's up to the board what they want to do here. But that's generally been the policy of the township.
To stay at 10 feet?
For non-residential uses, yeah.
Okay.
But you'd have to take into account the intensity and how many cars are coming and going at the same time.
Yeah. I'm just, like I said, I'm trying to relate to something I know, like maybe Mary Mother God Church or the ShopRite or something like that.
A lot of times at some of the shopping centers like that, they are the 10 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the shopping carts.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go through my memo if Tom is done with his, or are you?
I'm finished. Yes, thank you.
Okay, some of it we'll repeat or revisit, I should say. On the buffers, Mr. Stiers, section 188-38B, C, and D provide very specific requirements for buffer plannings. Would your client be amenable to meeting all those specifications to the satisfaction of T&M's landscape architect?
I would say yes. Yes.
Okay. The parking we just discussed. Now you're going to, if you're going to redesign the parking lot anyway, and there's been a lot of discussion already on changes to the plan, you realize you're going to have to come back at some point with the revised plan, correct?
If that's what it takes, yes.
Okay. Refuse collection. It looks like you just have a dumpster out there. You need to screen it somehow. Are you going to do something about that?
Yeah, most likely we probably fence it. If additional landscaping is needed, we can do that, but it would definitely at least be fenced.
Okay, you say most likely. What does that mean?
Well, it will be fenced, so.
Does
we
that mean
put a board up-
definitely? Okay, we'll need to see details of that.
Yep.
The signs, in my memo, there's a list of specifications that you'll have to meet and or request waivers. So they're all listed out there. You can come back with sign specifications at the appropriate time.
Yep. The intent was to meet the ordinance.
Okay, that's good. You've requested an economic hardship waiver for the tree mitigation. The board needs to grant that at some point or decide if they want to or not.
Mhm.
And then generally, and it's been discussed, the uses of the, what is not, the used to be the house, the former parsonage, if you will. We're going to need to see that all written out, exactly what's going on where and what times and who's using which facility. So you will need to submit that at some point.
Okay.
Moving on to the Environmental Commission letter. I'm referring to their letter of November 10th, which was the first one. On the third page of that memo, they had a number of requests that they needed to be addressed. Can you go through those? Can you address those? Or is there somebody else going to address the environmental issues?
Regarding the neighbors' comments, or is that?
No,
further
this is
down
from
the-
the Environmental Commission.
Oh, recommendations. Okay.
November 10th on the third page of their memo.
So the first one, Gary Dean is on with us, so he will address the traffic matter. So that'd be the first two, three.
Hold on a second. I think we're on a different page.
Oh, the whole, I'm sorry, I went down a little bit further.
No, no,
So
no.
as far as
Okay,
the
where it
phase
starts
one is
with conduct a phase one. That's the first request.
Okay, so the phase one was completed and I believe submitted to the township last Friday, or maybe the Friday before, the 18th. So that was submitted.
Mr. Maskey, just for clarification, which memorandum is being referred to at the moment? Which date?
Like I said, November 10th, 2020.
Different, okay, just making sure. Thank you.
So let me
So-
wait with Craig, is there any of those comments that you can't address or can't fulfill? There's several of them. Can you comply with all of the requests?
I'm just reading through them real quick.
Sure, sure.
I mean, I can just go right down. The phase one was submitted. As
Okay.
far as cut fill calculations, we can do if the application's approved. As far as the underground storage tank is, if there's a tank there, it will be removed because it's in the location of the new driveway. I believe they did investigate the distressed area, did not find anything. They did not find any spills or releases as part of the phase one. As far as the wetlands general permit, once it's received, we will definitely give a copy to the township. As far as the architectural plans, it looks like you're looking for the seat layout, so that plan would have to be updated. As far as the EIS and addressing neighbors' concerns, Ed Cook is on the call, and he can testify to that. The traffic information, Gary Dean can testify to that. And I think that's everything.
Okay, we'll just skip that on that memo, yeah. There was a follow-up memo dated November 24th, 2020, related specifically to the phase one. And there was 1, 2, 3, 4 bullets.
As far as 1 and 2, like I said, or actually 3, if the tank, if there's, what happens is, let me see if I can go to the existing conditions.
I think from the phase one, it's clear that there was a tank, or that there is an underground storage tank in place still.
Right, what it appears to be is in the location right next to the house, which is this location right here that I'm pointing out. And if you go to the, you can see the horizontal control plan. the curbing goes right along that location. So we're gonna have to dig that out. So the tank will most likely have to come out. So that's not a problem as far as removing the tank. I did talk to the person that completed the phase one. The tank is not regulated, but like I said, it's most likely in the way of installing the driveway, so it would have to be taken out anyway.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
You got it.
Mr. Stiers, Pat Gorman, I just have a few follow-up comments from what you testified to and a few outstanding matters. In regards to the parking, if we reduce it to the 9x18 size, that does require a waiver from this board. And of course, the plan will need to be reconfigured to show those dimensions.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Yeah, the reducing the parking spaces from 10x20 to 9x18
Yes,
will require an additional waiver
Yes.
from the board to do that.
correct.
And at that point, in the beginning of the testimony, you testified to that you'll be adding an additional space into, from what I saw that you pointed to, was into a landscape area, which would increase impervious coverage further. Could that extra space now be accommodated within a 9x18 system, along with the request from our board engineer and our fire marshal for an extension for better circulation to the back of the lot?
Yes, that would be intention. Yes.
Okay, but we will still need to relook at the impervious coverage to make sure it's adequate. If it's not adequate, then there's potential there that you'll need to do potential further renoticing if need be, because if it's increasing the impervious coverage further than what you already have.
Correct.
Okay. Going on to the outside agency approvals, you explained your DEP approvals, making headway, which is good. Have you heard back from any details from the DRCC?
I'll run through. So right now we have approval from Somerset County.
Yep.
We have a review from the Canal Commission. And we also have a review from Soil Conservation District, and all pertaining to some additional details. And then, like I said, with the DEP.
Sure. With those additional details that are needed for the DRCC, have any future implications on your site plan?
Honestly, the comments are all related to the recharge for the basin. And with the additional testing, I believe we can probably satisfy all those agencies at the same time.
Sure, because I'm
The
looking
reviewer for the Canal Commission is actually the same reviewer at the DEP.
Okay, and the Canal Commission responded, correct?
We have a review from them, yes.
Can you please provide us a copy of that review for our records?
Yes,
And then you got the county, and you got Somerset Union Soils, correct?
yes.
We address circulation. In regards to the landscaping, there were some alterations to the landscaping on the 30-foot sides where each resident is. There was further testimony that the possible fire lane areas could possibly go in those areas. This would also require a waiver if you're going to be intruding into that 30-foot buffer with any type of infrastructure for the fire apparatus.
Okay.
And then with the 30-foot buffering, I believe it does need to be put into a conservation easement.
Yes. I saw
And
that.
that should be new in your plan. And I'm sure Mr. Agranda will do the paperwork in regards to that regard.
Right, the deeds and the easement.
In regards to your the signs, we do need dimensions for the potential sign, any
Okay.
colors or what you're using, if there's going to be a method of illumination. Those details still need to be provided. We're unable to scale any signage at this time. And just to confirm, there's no signage proposed for the building.
No, there are not, just the freestanding sign.
Okay. Um, Lastly, trying to think if there's anything else on this, the lighting taken care of. That's all I have at this time. I believe the rest was covered by the testimony to Mr. Neff.
Okay, Patrick, I have a question for, I guess, you, Dave, and Tom. Have we arrived at the point where there's so many changes we're talking about on the site plan that we need to have them come back with the changes before we can consider, approving this or not? Or can you live with everything we talked through with the current site plan?
Mr. Chairman, generally speaking, if there were minor alterations, they could be conditioned, but so far it sounds like there'll be more than minor.
Right, we're talking about a possible second access road, for instance,
Yeah, and if they're going to change the parking and the buffering still needs to be addressed.
Because at this point, I'm getting confused of exactly what we're approving.
Yeah, exactly. The board needs to know what exactly it's voting on. So, yeah, I would recommend that at the end of tonight's hearing, at least, whatever recommendations that the applicant agrees to, at least to tonight, that they start to incorporate them into a revised plan. Whether or not that would be ready or not for a second hearing, that's up to them. But yeah, I think for the board's benefit, an updated site plan. And as Patrick pointed out, there may be some issues that would require additional waivers. The parking calculation will change. We can't tell them on the fly tonight. So yeah, short answer, a revised plan would be appropriate.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Frank, it's John. Yeah, I wouldn't be prepared to vote on this tonight either. I mean, even with the sign, are they just going to make the general statement they're going to conform to the township law and concerning the sign, things like that too.
Right. Okay, good. Okay, so we have any more questions from board members or professionals for this witness? If not, I'll open it up to the public.
Questions, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
For Mr. Stiers, I was trying to follow the question about the fire marshal's recommendation for a second means of egress. Tell me if I have misunderstood. First of all, you acknowledge the fire marshal's request, correct?
Yes, his request. Yeah, I mean, I tried to clarify because it's contradictory to the ordinance. So, but if the board is going to want a second means of egress or a means of egress for the emergency access, I said that we could possibly look into it along the east side of the property along the basin berm.
All right. Well, I'm not sure I agree with you about it being contrary to the ordinance, but in any event, then my understanding is correct that the request is there, but you haven't really made any engineering decisions on where that would be located.
That is correct.
Right. I believe my only other question is relative to the back section of the property. If I wrote it down correctly, you said that's the back 600 feet. Is the intention that would be placed into some sort of conservation easement?
I leave that to Mike. I think we had some discussions about doing that. Yes.
So that's you don't know.
Correct. I think that it was the intention, but I cannot answer that at this point.
I believe that would be an agreeable condition should this board approve the application to place the rear wooded area in a permanent conservation easement.
Thank you, Mr. Grodnick.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question for Tom Neff.
Go ahead.
Hey, Tom, when we went back and looked at the landscaping around the berm, and then on either side of the residential properties, from changing out the deciduous trees to the more of the arborvitae or evergreen, would you also want a revised calculation for the hardship waiver?
Yes, I think if the number of trees is going to change, that should be updated, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion to open public. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
At this point, we're going to open up questioning of this witness to the public. And since most of the public, if not all, is represented by Attorney Mensch, Mr. Mensch.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I assume everyone can hear me okay. I appreciate your allowing me to question the witness. Mr. Stires, I'm going to try to keep my questions somewhat organized, but there's a lot of topics, and forgive me if I jump around. But I would like to.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can before he starts, it sounds like he's not going to have one or two questions. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
Because I've been writing straight through testimony and I'm a little tired.
Okay, so by my clock, it's 8:41. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and be back at, okay, 9 minutes. Everybody be back at 8:50, okay?
Okay.
8:50, thank you.
Okay. And Freddie, you gonna stop the YouTube feed or?
No, I'll keep it going. It'll be better. It'll be easier, safer.
Okay.
So if you want to just hide your video, that will be fine.
Okay, we're getting close. 1 minute to go, Tina. Muted.
Sorry, I've been writing since 10 o'clock, so they stopped at 5:15 and then I rushed to get on this, so I'm just showing my age.
Tina, you're doing an excellent job with whatever you're writing.
I am actually writing very well, but the old shoulder's giving out, so. It's always Mike's fault. It's Mike's fault all the time.
That Mr. Ogrodnik.
Every time I
Always
see
call-
him, I get like, oh man, Mike's back. Oh no. I better put in my overtime slip.
You sound like my wife.
Wait a minute.
She's the real chairman here. That
What's
one.
her number? I'm calling her right now.
Okay, we're ready to start. Is everybody back?
Should we just make sure that at least the board is back, correct?
Yeah, Tina, would
Yeah,
you
I'm gonna take a roll call.
please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Where is my roll call sheet? Okay. Mr. Stamler,
Stop right there, I guess, right?
I'm asking him to unmute. So, you there,
Oh.
John?
Yeah, why? Who wants me?
I'm taking a roll call again,
You're gonna
John.
Here?
Okay, so you're here. Mr. Sirachi,
Here.
Miss Salili. Okay. Mr. Valchek, are you here?
There he is.
Mr. Valchek?
You just sat down.
Oh, I can't see him, so,
Yeah, maybe you can take the display down until we start up again.
It's still 8:50, so.
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Hey, I'm back.
Miss Haynes, you're here?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Herbert's here. All right, Phil, Miss Lily, are you here? Mr. Valchek, I'm sorry, did they say you were here?
Yeah.
He's here.
Yeah. he's-
I've
he's
asked
on
you to
mute.
unmute. Unmute your, there you go.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Wallmarker?
I'm here.
Okay, so we're just waiting for Phil. Mr. Gorman, you're here?
Philomena, can you unmute yourself? Are you back?
Mr. Maskey's here. She's not back yet.
I'm
Mr.
gonna
An-
ping, I'm gonna
Mr.
ping her.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, are you here?
I am
Mr.
a little slow in getting the mute off, but I-
Okay, and Mr. Neff, I see you. Fred's here, I'm here, Mr. Maskey's here. We're just waiting for Philomena.
I knew 5 minutes would be too short.
I could have went for a half an hour, but I'm not complaining.
no, it sounded like a complaint to me.
Tina, we could have just adjourned for the evening.
Listen, I have my rosary beads over here. I was kind of praying for that, but that's okay. God gives me enough. I'm not going to push it.
Oh, there's Phil.
Phil, you
Philomena?
here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, we have a full board available.
Okay, Mr. Mensch, the floor.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Stires, I'd like to start, if I could, by discussing in further detail, the memo from the fire marshal from November 17th, from which has already been a fair amount of discussion, but I believe, quite frankly, it's one of the more critical reports that we have in front of us. And I would like to note, I believe you may have said earlier, and I don't want to mischaracterize your testimony, that these were recommendations by the fire marshal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. For what it's worth, are you aware that the memo indicates that the Board of Fire Safety requires the following, and then lists out 7 or 8 bullet points.
Yes.
The first requirement from the Bureau of Fire Safety is that the fire hydrant required on site location must be approved by the Chief Fire Marshal. Have you identified the location of a fire hydrant on site yet?
No, not yet. We received this review on the 17th. So we can, as far as the changes, we can add the hydrant accordingly.
Okay. Do you know whether there's a location that the Chief Fire Marshal has indicated he thinks the fire hydrant should go?
No.
Do you know whether there be any changes to the plan, the site plan layout that you've provided as a result of placement of the fire hydrant?
I don't believe so, no.
You don't know, or you don't believe that there be changes required?
Not substantial changes. I mean, there's going to be a hydrant added to the plan and tied into the water line. So I wouldn't expect that would be a major change to the plans. No.
Do you know whether, just thinking about, for instance, on my street, I know the fire hydrants are kind of along the, near the street, so to speak. But that sometimes you also see, especially on commercial buildings, you might see fire hydrant access, closer to the building. Do you know whether the fire hydrant would have to go kind of near the street like a residential unit, or whether there would have to be some sort of fire hydrant access more adjacent to the building?
I would expect that the hydrant would be at or near the street, and the FTC for the fire department connection for the building has to be, I believe, within 30 feet of that hydrant. So those two would probably be coordinated on the throat of the driveway coming into the site.
How wide is the driveway?
Right now it's proposed to be 24 feet.
How does that width compare to the width of the current driveway?
Current driveway is, I would estimate, to be about 7 or 8 feet.
Okay. Do you know, with the 24-foot driveway, can 2 fire trucks pass each other on that size driveway? In other words, could one be coming in and one be coming out at the same time on that driveway?
I would say yes, as a relationship. Typically on a highway, the lanes are 11 to 12 feet wide. So this would be similar to 2 lanes of a highway, so the trucks could pass each other, yes.
Okay. The second requirement in the fire marshal's memo is to provide a plan showing turn-by-turn movement of a 47-foot-long fire truck into, and I assume it's supposed to say into and out of, and throughout the site. And there's a kind of a diagram attached to that memo. Have you provided that plan?
No.
Do you know whether or not a 47-foot fire truck could make that initial turn? I don't know what you want to call it, but as you go into the driveway, and you come up to that second parking
location right here.
Yeah. Can a fire truck make that turn and get into those back parking areas based on the curve and the turning radius that you have on the plan now?
I have not utilized their turning radius that they provided, so I can't answer that at this time.
Okay. Do you know what's the width? If there were cars parked in the parking spots towards the back of the parking lot, what would the width be? Yeah, if there were 2 lanes, if the whole parking lot was full, so to speak, would there still be 24 feet between those parking lanes?
Yes.
Okay. If you were to modify the site plan so that a fire truck, a 47-foot fire truck, could pull in down the driveway and essentially, turn to make a full turn circle, we were connecting the back of those parking lots, as has been discussed before. Do you know right now how much additional impervious coverage would be required to connect those two parking spaces, parking lanes on the back end with enough radius for a fire truck to maneuver through that parking lot?
No, I don't.
Do you know how many trees would be required or other, bushes, trees, et cetera, would have to be removed in order to accommodate that additional impervious coverage?
No, I don't.
The third requirement in the fire marshal's memo is the second access into the site. We've had testimony before regarding essentially, I guess, an area on the, I'm calling it the bottom. I forget if it's east or west, forgive me. On the bottom portion of the site plan. And if I understand correctly, that would basically be like a grassy strip that could accommodate the weight of a fire truck, but wouldn't be paved. Is that what you're possibly proposing?
Yeah, most likely it'd be some kind of grass strip with the grid inside the grass to provide the necessary bearing for the truck to get in and out.
Okay. Do you know how many of the trees shown on the landscaping plan would have to be removed to accommodate that?
No, I don't. I would try to maintain that. It's probably going to be somewhat of a grading shift as well as the trees. But irregardless, we would try and maintain the buffer and try to accommodate the access that the fire official is looking for.
Understood. How would you have to change the grading to accommodate that?
Well, like I said, there's a flat spot, for lack of a better term. If I move up, I'm sorry. You can see this flat spot going along the top of the berm. So that would have to be modified because there's also a drop in here where the emergency spillway is. And so there's a drop and a drop. So those two would also have to be softened, for lack of a better term. So when the truck comes through, it could get back out onto Hillsborough Road. So there'd be some modifications to the grading and then pulling the trees along the property line, as suggested previously.
Yeah, how close is that berm to the property line? From this diagram, it looks pretty close. That this access lane would be really close to that property line.
And this location right here, it's approximately 9 feet to the eastern edge.
Right now, as proposed, how much landscaping is in that area?
You can see it's basically a double row of trees.
Which is how many feet, of trees approximately? Meaning depth, depth-wise, from the property line going towards the church, how many feet of that area is proposed right now to have trees in it, or other?
At the deepest point, for example, right here is probably 15, 20 feet.
Okay.
But this is a mix of arborvitae and deciduous trees. So what is suggested that we possibly just do a single staggered row along the property line, which will allow that potential access point.
Right. And the trees that would remain there, for those of us who are not environmental experts, those are the kind of trees that have leaves in the spring and the summer and no leaves in the fall and the winter?
It would be, I have a mix of both right now.
Right now, if we were to remove what I believe are the evergreens to make room for the access.
No, the evergreens would be placed along the property line. So it would be a continuous screen.
Okay, continuous screen along the property line, but it would be less trees.
Yes.
Okay. Is there an engineering method by which the board, if it's inclined to approve the application, would be able to meet both the need to provide safety to the residents, safety to the parishioners of the church, and provide screening to the residents, or are they going to be forced to choose one or the other?
Well, I would intend to try and meet both of them.
Right now, if I understand your testimony, it's either going to be more trees as currently proposed, but no access road, or access road, but less trees. Is that correct? Those are the two options.
Would be an access with less trees, yes.
The fourth bullet on the requirement from the Bureau of Fire Safety states that if fire sprinklers are installed, the fire department connection must be located off of the building, location to be approved by the chief fire marshal. FDCs must have a 5-inch stores connection and a 30-degree down angle elbow with screen and cap. FDC sign required to be posted directly above and behind connection, 6-inch minimum letters, red, color, white, etc. Sign must be reflective. Have you identified a location for that connection? And has it been approved by the fire marshal yet?
No.
The fifth requirement from the fire marshal is that the fire zone will be required along the east side of the building. Where is that and what does that mean?
I'm not sure if he's confused on the side, because the east side would be the grass side of the building. I would expect he would have one in the parking lot.
Okay.
So that would have to be clarified.
Okay. If we assume that he meant the west side in the parking lot, do we have a fire zone currently established on the plans?
No, but it would most likely be along in the driveway area here, that so that there's no parking along that access point.
Okay, and that's what a fire zone would mean, simply designated an area with striping or the signage that indicates it's a fire zone and there's no parking there.
Correct.
I think the other two requirements on here are not really relevant to your testimony regarding a Knox box, and the building address must be posted in accordance with township code. Right now, there's the church seats 180 people, correct?
Yes.
And based on the township code, you've calculated that we need 60 parking spaces, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You have not done any independent calculation to determine whether or not that requirement is adequate or inadequate to meet the use of the church, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If they had an event, if the church had an event where you had all 180 seats filled, say for a wedding or Christmas mass or something that's a larger event, where and you had more than 60 cars, where would overflow parking potentially go? Do you know?
Well, the way it's landscaped right now, I wouldn't expect that there would be any room for overflow parking.
Would there be room for cars to park along the driveway? I'll assume cars won't park in the to be designated fire zone, but
Right.
Could they park on either side of the driveway?
Honestly, probably not.
Okay. What would prohibit them from parking on the driveway?
Well, I would expect that fire zone to almost be from one end of the building, at least to in front of the existing house. So maybe if they were to park in the driveway, which I wouldn't expect, it would be 1 or 2 cars in this location by the basin.
Okay.
One of the potential spots would be actually the road widening that they could park. Because that would actually be enough room that they would be off the lane of Hillsborough Road and they could park probably 2 or 3 cars on the curb line.
Okay, and you think if they were to, parishioners were to park on the widened road, that you'd fit maybe half a dozen cars?
Maybe.
Okay.
Not even.
Okay. If cars attempted to park further off-site on the road, in front of the adjacent properties, do you know whether they would have there's adequate shoulder for cars to park on that side of the road safely and without impeding traffic?
Not on the properties north or east and west of us, no. The edge of pavement is pretty much the white line of the road.
Okay. if a car were to park, let's say on the driveway area, overflow parking, someone tries to park there, do you know whether that would impede the ability of a fire truck to get access, or would they still be able to get down the driveway?
Well, if a car parked on one side, a truck could still get by on the other. It'd still be 12 plus feet left over.
As long as cars didn't park on
Both
both
sides.
sides of it. Okay. I don't know if you have it on one of your earlier images, but can you tell us what's across the street? Yeah, that actually works, Stephen, just that.
Well, I can go to the,
Yeah, either one, just something that. Okay, so you have residents directly across the street. And I want to talk a little bit about the drainage that you had discussed. Can you explain to me and to the public and the board right now, what's to stop water from flowing right down this driveway, which was 7 or 8 feet and is now about 3 times as wide, and just flowing right down into that neighbor across the street's driveway? How do we capture that water? And you may have said it, but I didn't understand it as a lawyer and a non-engineer.
right now, or what is proposed is that the driveway grades down towards Hillsborough Road. And there are 2 catch basins at the lowest point before getting out into the road itself. So it is picking virtually everything up from the site itself and directing it into the basin.
Okay.
And then there is a crown in the road that pushes water to the edge in this location here, and then down to to that inlet.
How big are those catch basins at the end of the driveway? Exactly I know conceptually what a catch basin is, but what's physically going to be there? Because when you have a light rain, it's one thing, but when you have some of the heavy storms that we get, and you have water that's traveling down that grade of the driveway at some speed, if you have a heavy storm, how does that catch basin, how do we know that it's adequate to actually make sure water is not just going right over it and into that driveway or onto the street?
Well, one of the things is there's actually a high point right here, which is at the top of the driveway. So the only water that these catch basins are picking up is the driveway itself.
Right.
And typically these types of inlets, these are B inlets, which are the ones that are on the curb line. So they have an opening on the face, can take substantially larger area than the area of the driveway in this location right here. So even with the larger rain, I would expect both these inlets to be able to pick up even a 100-year storm.
And I mean, beat a dead horse here, but when water is flowing down that driveway, I'm looking at the one line there that I guess separates both lanes of the driveway. What causes it to go into one of those catch basins as opposed to just going straight down the driveway and into the street?
The grade lines it's not a flat grade. So it's not a sheet flow that would just run right past. You can see there's a crown in the road. So the water is going to push to the curb line on both sides and be able to get into those catch basins once it flows down to that point.
Okay. And then that water would then go into that catch basin that you talked about.
It would go into the 2 catch basins, and that would then flow into the detention basin.
Okay. And the detention basin is that area that's got the shaded lines in it, right? Yep. That's right there. Will the detention basin, how will that appear to the public? If you're driving down the road, what will you see when you look at the detention basin?
Honestly, you'd probably, if you drive by at whatever 35 miles an hour, I believe the speed limit is, you would see right over top of it, because this is from the top of the berm to the bottom is 6 feet deep. So, and then it grades upwards from the sidewalk to the top of the berm is about 2 feet. So as you drive by at 35 miles an hour, you would see right over top of the basin and probably see the existing house as it is today.
Okay. Will that basin have standing water in it?
If it rains.
Am I understanding correctly then that you could have up to a 6-foot pond there? Water that's up to 6 feet deep in that detention basin?
No, it wouldn't get more than 4 feet because the emergency spillway. So we're required to put a 2-foot freeboard above. So that's what the berm is. So if it were ever to clog up, it would go through the spillway and again to the existing pipe in this location. So the highest the water will get will be 4 feet.
Okay. And how is that detention basin going to be protected from kids, animals, whatever, falling in or otherwise being attracted to a 4-foot deep pool in the center of the property, front of the property?
Well, again, it's not going to be a 4-foot deep pool unless we have a 100-year storm. So I wouldn't expect anyone to be out in a 100-year storm. And in most cases throughout central New Jersey and the state itself, that most basins are not protected or fenced because there's a couple trains of thought. If you fence it, you also prohibit the ability to go in and save someone if it were to happen. But again, this is a very small area. Most likely the basin would, for the smaller storms, I don't have the notes in front of me, but it would probably be a foot or two until it drained out, similar to most basins throughout the area.
What do other properties along Hillsborough Road, how do they treat their detention basins?
I think it's actually off the map. I believe there's a extremely large detention basin just west of Beverly, wide open and no fencing.
What kind of property is that on? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay. Is that detention basin, do you know where on the property it's located? Front, back?
I don't know any, I haven't done any research on it, but I know there's I'm virtually positive there's a basin there. I don't know whether it's what it's related to, what project.
Right.
But
the properties the map that we're looking at right here, the subject property is the one that's kind of in the, it's light red, near the center of the picture we're looking at, but slightly closer to the top. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. For the properties that we see, for the properties that we were just looking at on that picture, do any of those properties have detention basins in their front yards?
No, but as I said in my early testimony, the subdivision around us was built in the early 70s.
Right.
Which, if I recall, way before my time, but I believe that there was no real requirements for stormwater management at that time.
Okay. Would those properties typically need, would we expect that they would need stormwater basins?
Depending on what they do. If, for example, a property exceeded the impervious coverage of 15%, say, for example, they wanted to put a pool in, the township would require them to put dry wells in. So they would have to do some kind of stormwater management.
Right, dry wells are underground, correct?
Yes, but there are various ways of stormwater management.
Understood, but why can't you use whether you can or can't, why didn't you use dry wells here?
This is a more economic, and it's also more environmentally friendly because we have a bioretention system in the bottom of the basin, which will provide water quality. The DEP, with their regulations and their updates, are starting to frown upon manufactured treatment devices, which are dry wells, man-made water quality structures. They're more looking into this type of system to provide water quality treatment for projects, which is more natural using plants and plant materials, and for lack of a better term, the plant media in the bottom of the basin to provide a water quality. And it's also providing necessary recharge.
Could you do a dry well system here?
There may not be enough room, to be honest with you, because the other thing is an open basin provides substantially more volume to accommodate the runoff. If you put an underground system in, you're confined to whatever, 20 or 30 or more dry wells. And I'm not sure that they would meet the stormwater regulations.
And that's because the amount of stormwater that you expect from the site and the proposed use.
Yes.
If the retention basin was, if you had that 100-year storm and it was filled up to that 4-foot line, so to speak, how long would it take to dissipate?
It's required to drain within 72 hours.
Okay, so theoretically, if one event, no more rain, within 72 hours, that water level should go down to, I guess, nothing?
Correct.
And if it overflows, you mentioned there was some sort of overflow valve that brings that water to the street. Is that correct?
If the basin, let me go back to the grading plan. If the basin and the outlet structure were to fail, the water would flow through the emergency spillway and to the existing pipe, which is just adjacent to it.
Would that water be flowing above ground into the neighbor's yard, or to be flowing underground through pipes or other system?
It would flow above ground into the existing drainage ditch.
Okay. And is that drainage ditch, is that a township drainage ditch? Is there an easement there, or is there, who controls that drainage ditch?
I cannot answer that. We did not investigate the adjacent property other than to establish our property lines.
So right now, if there's an overflow from there, it's the applicant's plan that the water is going to flow from that property onto the neighbor's property into a drainage ditch that we don't know who controls it or how it's maintained.
That's the emergency spillway. All flows are intended to come out of the outlet structure through the proposed pipe to the road and tie into the township inlet in Hillsborough Road.
Understood. But in those events that there is a big storm, I'm not a meteorologist, so it always feels like we hear about 100-year storms more than every 100 years, but however frequent they are.
Even the 100-year storm will not flow through the emergency spillway. It was, it's like if everything went wrong,
right,
and even the emergency spillway got clogged, then the potential overflow would flow through that emergency spillway, but it is not intended to be used at all.
Understood. That's the fail safe if something else goes wrong.
If everything goes wrong.
The for this drainage tension basin, do you know who's supposed to maintain it?
The property owner or the church entity would have to maintain it.
What's around it? Is it grass? Is it some sort of wetlands material? What goes around a detention basin like this?
The side slopes would be grass. The top of the berm would be grass. The bottom of the basin would be a mix of shrubbery and small trees.
Okay. What kind of maintenance, for instance, is the property owner maintaining those, the emergency pipes that you mentioned that drain into the road? Are they maintaining those pipes?
Yes.
And if something went wrong, they would have to repair the pipes or clean them or check them to make sure that they're working properly?
Correct.
Do you know what the cost of doing that is?
Honestly, if they cut the grass And essentially in the bottom of the basin, for lack of a better term, it's like a peat moss material. If that is raked periodically, and secondly, there's an operation and maintenance manual that we will have to prepare and provide to the applicant that they would need to follow. But if they were to maintain the grass and to essentially rake the peat moss material on the bottom, that would really be the substance of the maintenance of this basin. So it's relatively simple to maintain.
What happens if they don't do that?
They're required to do it. Part of the stormwater rules is that they are required to do it. If they don't, the township has the ability to come in and enforce it.
Okay. And how the township has to inspect to make sure they enforce? How would somebody know if they're maintaining the retention basin?
Well, number one, it's right next to the road. But there is reporting that in the operation and maintenance manual, you're required to report your inspections to the township.
Okay. Something happened to one of those pipes that go in or out of the retention basin. Do you know what it costs to fix those pipes?
Not off the top of my head now.
You're aware, I think you testified briefly, that the applicant has submitted an economic hardship waiver for the cost of providing additional trees, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that was for the amount of $15,000 approximately?
1.5% is the $15,000. We estimate the plantings that are proposed to be approximately $38,000.
Okay. Oh, I see that. Okay. Yes. 30, my number shows 35,302.
Yeah.
I may be looking.
Sorry, I don't have it right in front of me at this second.
But I assume an economic hardship waiver suggests that the applicant does not have the money to, they're saying that they don't have the money to provide those trees, correct?
That's the criteria that the township has to request that hardship waiver.
How do we know that the applicant's going to, sorry, go ahead.
If it's in excess of 1.5% of the project costs.
Understood. Okay. With regard to, if we can go back, I don't mean to make it be the arbiter of the screen here, but if you can go to a kind of a pulled out image of the property.
You want to see the aerial?
Just zoomed out so we can see the rest of the site plan.
This, for example?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. You can even zoom in more. I just meant we were trying to looking at that front right portion.
There you go.
Yeah, sure. Okay. With regard to there was testimony earlier about the lights going from, possibly headlights into those parking spaces into the next door neighbor. Have you provided any plans or done any analysis with regard to exactly what level of ambient light would be able to be seen into that next door neighbor's property?
No.
With regard to drainage, can you go over now the back drainage? You talked earlier about, I guess probably should go to the drainage plan, probably be easier.
Nope.
So earlier you testified that in the back portion, because the grading, the drainage currently goes, again, I'm saying up to the property, to the top of our property on the site plan. And then we have the increased height kind of in the middle or at the end of the driveway. So some of the runoff then goes down the driveway and the rest of the runoff goes towards the, I'm pointing as if you can see, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have an inlet here,
Yep.
an inlet in this location,
Mhm.
and then the two we talked about in this location.
Okay. What happens to the water that's at the back lower portion of the parking lot?
This area?
Yes.
So everything in the parking lot drains from east to west into the inlet in this location.
Okay. And
There's
that's
a high
because,
point, there's a high point in the parking lot.
Mhm.
So this also drains to the back. This small area right here drains to this inlet right here. And then the driveway down goes to these two inlets here.
with regard, switching topics off of drainage for the moment, if you didn't connect the back parking lots and the proposal went as was approved as is, have you done any analysis with regard to the ability of cars to turn around? You know, if they get in there and someone's looking for parking space, they go in, they find out that the lot's full. Is there enough room? Have you done any analysis with regard to whether cars can turn around if those spots were full? Or would somebody have to back out of that back portion of the lot around that curve and, you know, do essentially a K-turn?
I did not do an analysis, but you know, like you said, it would probably be some sort of a K-turn or backup. Yes.
Okay, so they'd have to. Well, you didn't do the analysis, so we can kind of guess as to whether or not somebody would be able to turn around and drive out straight back around that curve, or whether they have to back up all the way through that curve and then turn to go either out of the driveway or down the into the other section of the driveway.
Correct.
You spoke about the garbage in this. I think you spoke about be a smaller hauler. You think? Do you have any idea about the size of the? You know, are we talking about a dumpster, or are we talking about garbage cans in an enclosure? Do you know?
Well, I would expect a smaller dumpster, and I know that the garbage service companies have smaller trucks that are virtually the size of a pickup now, and they have a small dumpster on them themselves. So they would go in there and pick up I don't expect a lot of garbage coming from the church itself. So a smaller truck could probably handle the service on this property.
Okay. Have you done any analysis or talked to any companies with regard to making sure that the trucks have, the ability to kind of meet that turning radius and get into the dumpster as required?
We have not contacted anybody, but like I said, the ones I've seen that go past my house once a week, they're the size of a pickup truck, slightly bigger.
Okay. You don't know when they'd be coming to pick up to empty them?
No.
You mentioned earlier, I think that there's 59 parking spaces on this plan?
There's 59 shown, but the intent is to have 60.
Okay. I thought I saw in one of the reports, there were 62 required. Maybe it was inconsistent. 60 spots for the church. And then I thought there was 2 required for the residence or the office building or whatever that's going to be now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe in the planner's report, they stipulated if there was a residence in the existing house, there would be 2 more spots required, but there's going to be no residence in the existing house, so those 2 spots are not required.
Okay, so because of because it's only going to be an office or other meeting room area, then it's not.
Correct.
You don't need the extra 2 spaces. And obviously, I guess it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, for the record, that if you add a parking space, that it's going to add more impervious coverage and potentially impact a tree or 2, correct?
It would go in this location right here. So no, it would not impact any trees.
Okay, it would add to your impervious coverage if there's no other changes in terms of size of the parking spaces or anything.
At this point, it would add 200 square feet. If we look into 9x18s, then it would be less.
Okay. Last set of questions for you on there was questions earlier from a couple of the board members with regard to the impervious coverage calculation that I guess it was provided by the applicant. Are you the one who calculated the impervious coverage?
I oversaw the completion of it in my office.
Okay. So I'm looking at the impervious coverage calculation form that's part of the application that was submitted. And it indicates that the footprint area of the house is 1,930 square feet. That's correct? That's an accurate, that's an accurate square footage of the area, the footprint area of the house?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. And then I think this is what some of the board members were getting to. It says driveway area, including curbing, 27,517 square feet existing on the property. Can you just explain for me, I mean, I don't think that there's 17,000 square feet of driveway currently on the property, or is there?
No, there isn't.
Okay, so what makes up that 27,517 square foot number?
Trying to see if I have that chart. Yeah, I don't have that chart in my file, but I can go through it. I've done a chart of the existing and proposed.
Right.
And this, you know, like I said, with the revised plans, I can easily put this on the cover sheet. But I can go, if you want the detail of it, I can give it to you right now.
Sure, yeah, if you have it, that'd be great.
I mean, the building, so the house, the detached garage, and the large shed behind the pool, total 3,618 square feet. The existing driveway is about 2,600 square feet. The porch, deck, steps, and landing. So there's a small porch. There's some a walkway out the front of the house. There's a deck in the back. It's 511 square feet. The concrete decking around the pool and some around the back of the house is 1,055. Pool itself is 729. As far as the proposed building, so that would be the existing house and the church, 7,869. The driveway / parking lot be 27,382. The porch on the front would remain. Most likely the walkway would be removed, so that's 82 square feet. The concrete, which is the walks around the church and the connection to the house, 1,745. That totals 37,078 square feet. The existing would be 8,516, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point. I think the board has kind of already asked for the information, but it's my math is trying to keep up with you. And there's a reason I went to law school and not into engineering or other field. But it's something, you know, if I did the math currently, I think what you just said, existing on the property is like 8,000 square feet.
Roughly 8,500.
8,500. You know, when I look at the impervious coverage calculation form, it looks like it's saying that currently existing is 29,000 square feet, and that the improvements, you know, are only adding, well, you know, still another 8,000 square feet, but it's only an 8,000 square foot difference. I think it's a 30,000 square foot difference of impervious coverage, roughly.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have the chart in front of me. I just, it's been a long time since we filled that out, so.
Understood. Do you know if any other properties, you know, in the area exceed the impervious coverage?
I did not do that analysis.
Okay. All right, yeah. Mr. Chairman, I think I'm done. If you either give me 1 minute just to check my notes, or if somebody else wants to ask a question and come back, whatever. I don't want to waste the board's time. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
I was going to open it up to the rest of the public once you finish.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of things which were raised by Mr. Menches.
Go ahead, Mark.
Maybe that will help. Mr. Stires, if the second egress were installed in the general nature that you've described, how would that operate after a snowfall?
With the gridding that's put in, I believe that can be plowed and maintained. I mean, that's the intent. The grid within the grass structure is to allow the truck, the bearing capacity to get the truck out. So I would expect if the parking lot is snow plowed, that egress point or path could be plowed as well.
Tell me if what you're saying is realistically that should be a requirement.
That's fine. Yes. I thought you were asking how it would be done.
No, that was my first question, but your answer suggests to me that something that would need to be done, and therefore something that perhaps the board would want to impose as a condition were this.
Agreed.
And then related to that, generally speaking, there's a lot of driveway and a lot of distance in here. After a substantial snowfall, where does all that snow go?
I would expect that ultimately the snow would be piled along the back here.
The plan you're showing has something back there just behind, perhaps in a sense, dividing the area that's proposed to be developed from that back section. What is that along there?
This area right here would be the new quote unquote tree line. And this is the silt fence and limited disturbance.
Okay. Those are not
No
permanent,
crime.
correct?
Oh. We have coupons too. Oh, Bath and Body Works, I have coupons.
I'm sorry, something's interrupted here. Is there anything that would impair the snow from being pushed off the back of the parking lot?
Other than the curb line, no.
Okay. Those are,
And, you know, again, you know, it could be, if it were snow plowed, most likely it would be brought through. A snow plow would go along the edge of the church and push it to the west side of the parking lot. Any remainder would probably be pushed along. So you'd have a pile along the west side and in the rear. And then I would expect the person that would be snow plowing that would probably push this way and have it piled. So really it'd be along the perimeter of the entire parking lot, with the exception in front of the church, which would be pushed away from there.
all right, thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman, I do remember my last question. And this was just regarding the DEP permits, the application that's currently pending. Mr. Stires, if the DEP denied the permits that are currently pending, what would that do to the project or the site plan?
Probably, yeah, it would definitely impact the layout of the project. But like I said, in our discussions, I would expect that we would have the permit issued within a month or two.
Is there any reason why you know, I mean, judging the time, I'm assuming we're not finishing this application tonight and the notes that comments I think that were been received, but should the board, depending on when it actually gets provided, should the board wait until the DEP approval comes back before continuing to hear the application, or can the board hear the application pending the approval of the DEP, given that it's going to impact, given that the location of the wetlands is essentially right where the church is, that could otherwise drastically impact the site plan?
Well, typically, the approvals are subject to outside approvals. So if we don't get them, then I would expect that if the approval is granted, then we'd have to come back or modify, or the project would be dead, but it would be subject to.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stires, Mr. Chairman. That's my questions.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask for anybody that's not represented by Mr. Mensch in the public if they want to ask questions of this witness. So Fred, would you unmute the public line so we can see if there's anybody out there that has questions?
Sure will. I see one person with their hand raised. So again, if you have a question for this witness, again, I'll unmute you. You need to please state your name and address for the record. And again, these are questions for this witness only at this time. So Mr. Warner, I think.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Again, please state your name and address, please.
First name is David, last name Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R. I live at 54 Beverly Drive. Have a few questions. First, I guess, related to the basin that was described in I guess it's the eastern part of the property. And it seems to be located right next to the current major or the largest wetland area on the property. And you talked a little bit before about this 100-year storm adding water to that basin. So I guess my question is, if there's wetlands and there's standing water in there, as a recent property walk showed, that water has to go somewhere. Wouldn't it eventually just settle in that drainage basin sort of permanently, so there would always be water in there? Or what's going to happen to the water that's standing right now in the wetlands?
Well, this depression would no longer be there, obviously. Same with the one that I'm circling right now. And then all the runoff would drain to the detention basin. This structure right here is an outfall, so it has an orifice in the bottom, and then an orifice up a little bit higher, and then a grate in the top. So the intent is a 1-year storm, which is the most frequent and carries the most, the oils from the parking lot would come in and provide the water quality. So that lower storm would actually recharge back into the ground. And the percolation rates that we have looked at with the testing we've done especially the last week, the soils appear to be acceptable and in good condition that would recharge that small storm. The larger storms are intended to discharge from this structure and out and into the existing pipe and to the north.
So I guess my question is the water that's standing right now on the property is a result of depressions it's creating the wetland and not due to some underground factor that's now going to just displace that water from where it is now right to where the drainage basin is.
Right.
Okay. In terms of that same area, you had mentioned before about fire truck access and the grass of a special mesh and a parking issue, an overflow parking. And you had testified that in the front of the property that there could be 4 or so cars parked there on the curb line if there was a need for overflow parking. If that area on the eastern side is now used for emergency access, wouldn't that eliminate any possibility of parking in the front of the property then?
Well, the emergency access would be only that. I mean, if a fire truck were to ever come in there, they would have the ability to drive through there and circulate out of the property.
Right, but what I'm saying now that if it's overflow parking, there's cars parked on the curb line, that fire truck can't egress out to the street because there's now cars parked on the curb line. Is that the intent, that the fire truck could come out and go back out to the street?
Yes, out onto the street, yes.
Yeah, so right where you are right now, if there's cars parked there due to overflow parking, wouldn't that have to be striped in a way where they could never park there?
Or the cars would be moved. I mean, if there's a fire, I'd expect that the cars would be moved out of the way.
What if the people, I just would think that that would be a no parking zone, because it's a fire egress in and out rather than moving cars in an emergency situation.
Well, then it would, again, we could stripe this one little spot here. So instead of 3 or 4 cars, it'd be 2 or 3 cars.
Right. I guess that's my question. Is that would there have to be some area there that would need to be striped based upon the emergency in and out? I guess that's my question.
I guess technically speaking, it could, if needed be.
Okay. I have a question regarding that. The attorney at the beginning mentioned a D1 variance, and it was basically being changed for complexity issues. He described it as the most, I guess, complex part of that D1 variance. I don't know if it is or not, but it essentially involves that connection between the house and the proposed church, and it's going to be ADA compliant, and there's going to be a connection there. And the house being withdrawn as part of the plan in terms of this accessory use clause. If it's only used as an accessory use or classified in that way, what would be the need then to create this like transition between both buildings, making it ADA compliant and all that? And how would that still classified under this accessory use clause as opposed to whatever main use it should have?
Well, the planning testimony will be provided later on in the testimony. However, basically what we did was we removed the residential component within the existing dwelling. So that structure will still be there, but it's going to be used for offices and meetings.
And that would make it the accessory use regardless of how it's connected. It's not residential use, it's office use, and that makes it the accessory, I would assume.
That's what we're, I can leave that to Mike, but essentially that's what our belief and testimony would be. And that would be related to the planning testimony.
Okay, I have one last question, and maybe if I could ask you just to sort of pan out maybe 1 or 2 so they can see maybe my property up on the corner.
Oh yeah, hold on.
Yeah,
so you're up here?
So I'm on the corner, and
right here?
Yeah, and it has to do with sort of the runoff and the impervious water, and I saw where the basins are as it drains down the driveway. I saw where the catch basins are, I guess, in the back area where it said it drains from sort of east to west. And that's going to catch all the surface water. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Has there been anything with the underground water sort of looked at? Because I can tell you that my property on the corner, on any sort of heavy rain, it doesn't have to be even a major rainfall, develops in my backyard a pool of water, sort of on my back fence line, and it flows. You can see there's almost like an underground stream that flows through my yard out to almost the corner there of Beverly and Hillsborough Road, where there is a drainage, storm drain in the road. There's water that flows there. How does this design sort of prevent more of that from happening?
Well, like I said, the design is intended to collect the runoff and put it into the basin and discharge it at the required rates, and then ultimately back into the drainage ditch that goes to the north.
But I would assume that water that's coming there is not just because there's no impervious surface. I assume that's water that's underground that's coming through. I'm just wondering if that's going to impact in any way to make this a bigger issue for not only me but my neighbor, next to me. Our backyards just are swamped when there's any sort of major rainfall. And now that we have this big impervious structure going, however many feet away, I'm just fearful that it's going to become much worse of an issue.
Well, the runoff is not going towards your property.
I can tell you that it is. well, water is flowing that way. Now, the runoff may not be designed that way, but I can tell you that water is definitely flowing that way.
It is now.
Correct. So is it your testimony that what you're doing maybe correct some of those issues, or you don't know?
Well, there's going to be a curb line along your side, for lack of a better term, of the project. So the water's going to hit that curb line. So anything that does drain to the west, the only thing left draining to the west is going to be, 30 feet of grass. So if this area now drains towards you, it will not anymore, because it's going to go into the drainage ditch. And keep in mind, this basin will reduce the rate of runoff for the 2-year storm, the 10-year storm, and the 100-year storm. So the rate of runoff coming off the property is actually going to be less than it is now.
Okay. And I thought that was my last question, but I have one more now that I see this. It's related to the landscaping and that economic hardship waiver. From what I saw, I guess there's going to be the removal of 92 or some odd trees in the property. Is that like a number that you're familiar with, or is that accurate?
Yeah, I believe that's approximately the number. Yes.
And there are how many trees going back potentially, or there should be 72 trees that go back at like the 35,000 number.
Bear with me a second.
Yeah.
There are 89 trees being removed. And based on the formula replacement, we were required to replant 198. However, we're planting 126.
Okay. And that is only if the economic, I guess.
No, that's what we're planting. And what we're saying is that in the ordinance, we can request a waiver if it exceeds 1.5% of the project costs. And we've documented that we're literally double of that with what we're proposing. So we can't get to that 198. If we got that 198 number, we would go even higher.
Okay.
So that's the reason we're asking for that waiver.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you for answering the questions.
No problem.
Okay, Chairman, I see another hand. So,
I see Penny.
okay, Patty, if you could unmute yourself. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Tom Kletz, 500 Hillsborough Road, the property directly next to east, I guess, as we've been calling it all night. And my concern is that it's a swamp now. My parents built the house in the early 60s, and after they developed it in the early 70s, there's been water issues. Every time it rains, there's water everywhere. And a couple of the people on the board did a walkthrough, they noticed it. And then you're going to discharge the retention basin onto the ditch that my dad made in the early 60s. Where's the storm sewer? This should be going into a storm sewer on Hillsborough Road, not onto my property. If that ever backs up, where's all that water going? It just makes no sense. How are you going to discharge all that water from 27,000+ square feet of impervious surface onto my property? And then it's going to be my problem, which is already a swamp in the east corner where it discharges. Go out there right now. I guarantee there's 3 inches of standing water or more, the whole corner. And sometimes it doesn't dry out for weeks. This can't happen. It really can't.
You mentioned the basin down the street.
And the basin down the street is wide open. It's not anything like this. It doesn't discharge onto people's property. It goes into a stream that eventually runs into the pond.
And it's not on anyone's property.
Let's first of all, we should have only one person who's identified themselves speaking. And also, while obviously the board wants to be helpful to people who don't understand the process precisely, what I'm hearing really are statements. It's important that people understand that if you're trying to make a statement and you want the board to consider it, this is not the time to do it. You're going to have to do it when statements are done. That's for your protection, so that the board will be entitled to consider that statement.
Okay, thank you. I'm in the beginning of the meeting, they said that there's 20 persons that would use the church on any given Sunday. Why do they need a 180-seat church for 20 people?
I believe they said that the church, the main service is on Sunday and that it's 180 seats, and the ordinance requires 1 space per 3 seats. And that's why we have 60 parking spaces.
That's not the question.
Well, that wasn't my question. It was just, if there's only 20, 25, maybe 30 people coming on Sunday, why do they need 180?
I don't think the statement was there's 20 people on Sunday. I think that was one of the other days.
Okay.
And to kind of answer your statement or question from before, the basin is intended to be piped through the catch basin in the road, like you said, and into the storm sewer in Hillsborough Road. And then it'll discharge in the 30-inch pipe that crosses underneath Hillsborough Road and then drains to a 36-inch pipe and ultimately in the ditch to the north.
Right. Okay. I get all that.
Yeah, and Mr. Kless, like Mark Anderson said, that after the presentation of the application of the applicant's case, you'll get a chance to, make a statement and tell us more about your problem with your property.
Thank you.
Hey, Craig, if I might follow up, when you're talking about that ditch to the north, can you zoom out to the colorized aerial picture? Actually, right where you're, well, that might be my pointer. Sorry. Yeah, it's kind of outlined there with the dotted line where that water goes to. Right now, the only water going into there is coming out of that what's coming off Hillsborough Road, or potentially what's coming from the person who just spoke from the corner of their property that also seems to drain into that same area. Has there been any analysis as to whether or not that ditch across the street can actually hold all of this water? It seems to be right in the middle of that person's property there with the pool.
Again, the basin has been designed to reduce the rate of runoff from the existing condition. So for example, the 2-year storm, if this project were approved and constructed, the 2-year storm would be 50% of what it is now. The 10-year storm would be 75%.
Right, but none of that water is going into that ditch now. That water's draining to the west.
As I said, this portion, like this, I guess you could say, drains to this catch basin. So that rate reduction is based on what is draining to this point now.
Okay, so including all the water from the back of the parking lot that ultimately winds up in that same spot, that's less than what's going there now?
Yes. That's what required by the rules.
Okay.
So theoretically, for example, say we develop the whole property, and even though the back portion of the property drained to the north and we suddenly collected it and discharged it at this point,
right,
it still needs to be 50, 75, and 80 of what's going here now.
Does that require construction on the person who just spoke property to get that pipe under there to connect it?
No, that's in the right of way.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Stiers, maybe you could just explain, just for everyone's awareness, a little bit how it's less, because they're looking at this as you're adding so much impervious. How is it less? So, maybe some information on some of it's getting recharged, a lot of it right now may be discharging directly to that inlet in the road, whereas with your design, as with any detention basin, it's going to be released at a much slower rate. So it's going to be stored temporarily in the detention basin, and you have the different orifices and grates on the outlet control structure to control the rate at its release, instead of it all going at once in a storm. Maybe just a little on that for the board's and the public's awareness.
Correct. I mean, so that's essentially why the basin fills up, is because the rate of runoff is being restricted. So until it has the chance to discharge, the water is being retained in the basin until it's discharged. But the rate of runoff that this leaves or crosses Hillsborough Road in that 30-inch pipe is being reduced by 50, 75, and 80% in the 2, 10, and 100-year storm. So it's kind of like, for example, filling up a glass and you have a straw at the bottom of it. So that's kind of an analogy for you.
Okay.
And yes, the 1 year storm is actually being recharged into the ground. So that bottom orifice is actually up off the ground, off the bottom of the basin, to force the water to recharge into the ground.
Okay.
Mr. Sires, just one other thing real quick, just while we're talking about this, something I noticed. Can you just be sure to add the emergency overflow berm elevation, the 115.5 to your plan, just so contractor makes sure that it is raised up above the overflow, just to make sure, again, that's another added level of protection, that it all flows through the outlet control structure before going over the spillway to the adjacent property.
Yes.
Thanks.
And it's John Stamler. From listening to the neighbor, I don't think his one question was ever answered. But regarding the parking, we already know the standard is 1 parking space per 3 seats. I believe, if I understand correctly, his question was, if there's only going to be at a max approximately 70 people on Sunday, why do you need 60 parking spaces? So I think that's the point he was trying to get across.
Again, if we put in less than the ordinance, we would be asking for another design waiver or variance. I mean, the other possibility would be, if we don't need all the parking, we could bank the parking for now, and if we need it, then we can install it later on.
Well,
John, I think that question is more for the pastor, is why does he need 180 seats if there's only going to be 70 people there?
I agree. That's the real question.
I was just bringing up what he said from the neighbor, okay?
Right.
Yeah, hold that question for the pastor when he testifies, John.
Yeah, I mean, if we can adjust accordingly, I mean, that could save on some of the coverage too. So.
That's right.
Okay.
That would also, Frank, that would also tie into the size of the church building,
yes.
Which would, again, help their impervious numbers.
Yes. Okay, folks, I don't see any more public questions. So, Fred, if you can mute the public line.
Yep, we're good. You're good.
I'm going to go back to Mr. O'Brien. Now, it's our policy not to take new testimony after 10 o'clock, and it's after 10 o'clock. So we got to decide what to do going forward. Obviously, we didn't carry this. Patrick?
Yes.
You got the schedule.
Well, I mean, the only schedule we have right now is our January meeting was the only scheduled meeting at this point. We haven't adopted next year's calendar yet.
Right.
So Gronick, it's Patrick. I believe your time of decision though is to the end of this month. I think an extension would need to be granted. My recommendation is to have something out to at least the middle, at least to the end of March. I request a little bit more time at this point because we're going through the virtual meetings. Some of these things take longer, some of these things take short, and then God forbid we go into some type of lockdown situation again. So that would be my recommendation for a extension if you wish.
Well, Patrick, it's John Stamler.
Yes.
I mean, what do we have? Do you have anything booked in January or
Yeah,
February?
January, we have homeowners that we need to attend to that are coming up to date.
You know, we can't speak for next year's board, of course, but how does the first meeting in February look at this point if they schedule one?
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me, this is a question to some extent for Mr. Ogrodnik. The only meeting to which the board can definitively adjourn this would be the only meeting in January that is already scheduled, which would also be a reorganization meeting. If you attempt to do it to some time beyond that, then the applicant is necessarily going to have to produce new notice. Now, if the applicant feels that they're going to have to do that anyway, then that's a non-issue. Otherwise, my recommendation is always you carry it to the first meeting, the one that is scheduled, even if there is an understanding it's going to have to be carried further from there.
My comment on the notice issue is I need to meet with our traffic engineer, Mr. Dean, and Mr. Stiers to have a better understanding of the impervious. Can we reduce it? Can we keep it where we are? If I'm substantially increasing the impervious, I think it would be prudent, given the public participation, to renotice. However, if we don't need that, I don't think we need to renotice this application. So we would ask that it just be carried to the January meeting with no appearance necessary, so that could be carried to a future date.
We would still need an extension because at this point I believe it's December 28th is the time. So either way, you'll need an extension.
Oh yeah, certainly my comment was not to question Mr. Gorman's request for an extension.
No. But that's the only mechanism, as Mark says, that can be done at this point, because that's the only date certain at this point. So it'll be carried to that date to be carried to another date. I know it sounds redundant, but that's the way the law works at times.
That's how the government works, right?
It's an artifact of the municipal land use law and the open public meetings law.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as I know, we've been having the first Wednesday of the month, at least since I've been zoning officer and board secretary, and even before with my predecessors. Mr. Valchek, I think, it has a long history here, so he can probably vouch for that at the same time.
Okay, so do we need a motion?
Mike, Mr. Chair, Frank, just a moment. Mike, keep in mind that if you're going to be revising the plans, give yourself time to do that, and everything has to be to us again 10 days before the next hearing, whenever that might be. So make sure you factor that into your.
Okay, so when you say next hearing,
come back,
the next real hearing, right? Not the make.
Yeah. Right, when you expect to be heard.
Which would probably, from what I understand in the schedule, is most likely the first meeting in February.
Did Mr. Ogrodnik agree to the extension? I didn't hear.
That's something I'm gonna just think about for a moment, and I'll chat with Mr. Gorman offline on that.
Well, we kind of have to know, otherwise we're going to have to make a decision. Without completing your hearing. So well, I'm not sure what the hesitation is. The board is up against it. I mean, if we had any choice,
I understand the inquiry, and unfortunately, it's difficult to caucus with my client on a public forum. But if history is any guide, I would. It's something, again, I have to discuss with my client that I can't do at the moment. But
wait a minute.
Wait, and Mr. Anderson, does this put the board in a tough spot right now?
Well, frankly, it puts the board in a position of deciding that if there is no extension granted, The board will have to make a decision now based on what has been submitted.
That's what I'm thinking.
I would suggest for the benefit of the applicant that that would not be a desirable outcome. Your call, Mr. Ogrodnik.
Well, again, I'm inclined to recommend to my client, as I've done in all applications in Hillsborough, to agree to that extension.
We need a
Well,
We need an answer. Do you want me to call a 5 or 10 minute recess so you can call him on the telephone?
No, we'll agree. We'll agree to the extension of time for this application.
That would be as Mr. Gorman requested to the end of March.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so we need a motion to carry us to the next possible meeting until January 1st, January meeting.
So list them on the agenda with the expectation that we will then assign a date farther out in February, probably.
Okay, so my question is, do we need a motion to do that, or we just do it?
You do, Mr. Chairman. You need a motion and a agreement to do that. And Mr. Ogrodnik is clearly making a request that that be done without further notice.
Okay.
Yes. Patrick, what's the exact date of the meeting? You have to say what the date is.
For January,
Yes,
January 20th.
thank you.
Okay, so do we hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good, carried till the January meeting.
Mr. Chairman, these things I find are sometimes a bit confusing to the public. So I'm in hopes that it helps clarify it to the public. The adjournment to January 20th is really a procedural matter. The board recognizes that it will not actually be heard on January 20th. However, anybody who's interested in this application needs to keep up with it. After the January 20th meeting, there should be a definitive new date.
Okay. I think we're finished for the evening. I think we're finished for the year.
Yeah. So thank you, board, for dealing with all the difficulties with everything going on this year. We all came together and really move things forward with the virtual meetings and the teleconference meetings before that. So I want to thank the board for their time. One other quick announcement. We have a new administrative clerk in our office, Gabriella. She's filled in for Eva's spot. We're getting her brought up to speed, and she's with us now full time. And for coming up in January, after the reorg, that we will have the meeting at 7:30 with potentially 4 homeowner applications on for that evening.
And Patrick, I'm assuming that after January, we will go back to the 7 o'clock start for our regular meetings?
If we elect to do so, we can.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So the reorg meeting will be at 7, the regular meeting at 7:30 in January.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and I'd like to thank the members of the board for giving me the opportunity to act as your chairman this year. Great honor for me. Wish everybody.
Frank, thank you for doing a good job. It's been tough.
You've gotten better. It must be that shock treatment that you had there, Frank.
Yeah, you guys are great to work with. You made it easy for me. Thank you.
I agree.
You're welcome. You're welcome, everyone.
And great, yeah. Tina, thank you.
Tina, thank you.
Mark,
What I gotta put up with, what I gotta put up with.
You can't forget Mr. Anderson, who keeps me and all the young attorneys on our toes and researching in the depths of the Cox Manual, for sure.
You're doing well, Mike.
Wish everybody a happy holiday and a great new year.
Yeah, happy holiday. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. See you next year.
Okay, Tina. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Reggie can stop the tape.
Did you have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, we have to have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Everybody leaves. It's adjourned.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim second. That's
Those
good.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank
Good night.
you, Mr. Chairman. Good night.
All right, everyone.